the President of Korea addressed the nation. He greeted all the citizens. Before starting his speech, he made a request. He asked everyone to make sure that the people around them were watching TV. He repeated his request. In homes, families sat together in front of their televisions, watching quietly. Some people shouted to others, telling them to turn on their TVs. The message was passed around. The president again asked everyone to turn on their televisions so that as many citizens as possible could watch the broadcast. The president continued his address. He said that he was hearing reports that the viewership ratings were rising sharply, even though not even a minute had passed since the broadcast began. He thanked the citizens sincerely for their understanding, saying that they must have been deeply troubled by the unexplained restrictions. He then announced that martial law had been declared at exactly 5 p.m. on July 16th. He explained that the military had taken control of media outlets and key infrastructure, and that major roads had been closed. And the reason he went this far was because he wanted to face the apocalypse in an orderly way. He added that everyone already knew this by now, that the scenario from a game called Survival Life was happening in reality. He then mentioned the asteroid from that game, called Unjambi. It was heading straight toward Earth. And according to news received at dawn, the US military failed to shoot down Unjambi. As a result, the asteroid eventually fell near Okinawa. The impact caused a massive explosion. It was later confirmed that the damage was catastrophic, and sadly, the Japanese people were currently turning into zombies. He explained that the zombie spores released from Unjambi were spreading rapidly, and that those spores would reach their country at 1 p.m. today. Addressing the nation again, he said that the zombie outbreak could not be avoided. However, according to their findings, it appeared that a small number of people, including awakened individuals, might be able to avoid zombification. So for those people, he had prepared something. Although it would not open for a year to ensure safety, time shelters had been installed at the marked locations, and everyone should head there. He then said that there was also a strategy guide for the monsters that would appear early on. He added that all of this information would be distributed again through leaflets dropped from airplanes. After that, he announced that all thermal power plants would soon be shut down. Finally, he said that he was a person with many shortcomings, but he believed he had done what needed to be done in this final moment. The president ended his speech. He said that it had been an honor to serve his fellow citizens. He bowed deeply and told everyone to survive and meet again someday. He added one last thing, thanking the anonymous informant who had given them the exact day of the disaster. The broadcast ended, and the screen went silent. Elsewhere, a man held the remote and let out a sigh. He thought that he truly hoped the apocalypse would not come. But since it was already here, he accepted that he had to survive. As someone who had already experienced the apocalypse once, he prepared himself. He picked up his weapon and moved forward with a calm smile. He was our protagonist, a few months before the apocalypse began. A very difficult game called Survival Life was released. It was a VR apocalypse game, also known as Sura. The game was known for its extreme difficulty. Even hardcore Korean gamers found it overwhelming. Because of that, the game shot to the top of the charts right after its release. But despite its early fame, the game ended up with only 4 players left after a year. The game's popularity fell just as quickly as it had risen. However, the game was so difficult that one by one, his friends also quit, and he was the only remaining player in Sura. He hoped they would join his stream, but he could not bring himself to let go. As time passed, the other veteran players logged in less and less, and in the end, he was left alone. But even then, he kept recording update videos so he could still enjoy the game with them. He streamed day and night, waiting for them to return. Several months passed quickly after that. During that time, the tutorial difficulty was greatly lowered, and the early stages of the game were improved. As time went on, new enemies appeared in the game. Along with the zombies and fantasy monsters, grotesque mutated creatures began to show up. He welcomed the massive update at first. However, his friends slowly lost interest and stopped logging in altogether. In the end, the game named Sura was left with only one concurrent player. And finally, the day came when he became so frustrated that he decided this time he would quit for real. But just then, a system message appeared in front of him. The Survival Life operations team announced that before making their announcement, they wanted to thank all the users who had loved the game. They stated that in 1 week, Survival Life's service would be permanently terminated. They said they felt deep regret, but hoped they might meet again someday. Hearing this, he was stunned, and wondered if they had been waiting for him to finally give up. Looking at the ruined city and the monsters around him, he quietly said that before quitting, he wanted to defeat that one monster together with his friends. A heavy feeling of despair washed over him. He stopped the recording and slowly took off his gear. After that, he deleted his streaming account and the MeTube channel where he had streamed Sura for 5,500 hours. However, he could not bring himself to throw away the hard drive filled with memories, so he pushed it into a storage closet. Kimbap Joa, no, Kang Song-ho, closed that chapter of his life. From that moment on, he truly began living his real life. Just like that, 3 months passed, and Kang Song-ho was living a proper life. The reason his ID was called Kimbap Joa was simple. He had been running a snack shop for 3 years. The snack shop was on the first floor of the house he inherited after losing his parents during his 2nd year of high school. The 2nd floor was where he lived. A framed photo of his parents rested quietly inside the house. Outside, the sign read, Soo-hong's Tasty Snacks, and customers gathered in front of the shop. Kang Soo-hong stepped forward with a tray and started to say that the food was ready, but someone loudly called out his name. A young woman walked closer and laughed, saying business seemed really good today. She was Mi-kyung. She was a local hairdresser and a regular customer, though he had never asked for her last name. It was no secret that she was pretty. Mi-kyung leaned in and asked if he had seen something interesting. She lightly tapped him and showed him her phone. Soo-hong looked confused and asked what she meant. Mi-kyung said she had heard from some kids earlier that this topic was trending in online communities. She showed him a post on her phone, explaining that people were saying a status window could really appear if someone shouted it out loud. She added that many comments were arguing about it, with some people saying it worked and others calling it nonsense. Soo-hong looked at the screen and responded calmly, saying he understood. Mi-kyung then said she had already tried it herself, but sadly, nothing showed up for her. Hearing that, Soo-hong laughed lightly. He told Mi-kyung that there was no way something like that would actually appear. With a smile, he asked if she was being a little too gullible. Sometime later, after Song-ho closed his shop and went home, he remembered what Mi-kyung had told him. He didn't want to believe it, but the thought tempted him to give it a try. So he raised his hand and shouted, calling for a status window. But unfortunately, nothing happened at first. He turned away, already convinced it was nonsense. At that moment, a strange blue light flickered in the air. A sharp sound rang out as something appeared in front of him. Song-ho froze in place, his eyes widening. A glowing screen floated before his face. He stared at it in shock and shouted in disbelief, asking if it had really shown up. The glowing status window hovered in front of Soo-hong. It showed his basic information, including his health, strength, agility, dexterity, and perception. There were no points, skills, or effects listed yet. One line caught his attention. A trait called Open Private Portal. As he stared at the screen, he felt a strange sense of familiarity. He thought he had seen something like this before. Suddenly, an image flashed in his mind. His eyes widened as he realized it looked similar to survival life, but the thought did not fully fit. He quickly denied it, remembering that Sura never had a trait system. His gaze returned to the trait section, focusing on the words, Open Private Portal. He clicked on it, and another window appeared, explaining that the portal could only be used by the trait holder, and that the command was Open Portal. Song-ho rubbed his chin. After reading it carefully, he muttered that the command itself felt a bit lame. Soo-hong-ho raised his hand and spoke the command, telling the portal to open. Blue light gathered under his palm and began to spin. The air twisted as streams of light swirled together, forming a bright circle. In the next moment, the light expanded and turned into a large glowing gate. The portal stood tall in front of him, shining with a deep blue color. Soo-hong stared at it in awe, and quietly said it was amazing. As he looked closer, a familiar feeling struck him. He realized the portal looked exactly like the labyrinth gate from Sura. His heart started pounding. He grabbed his head in shock and asked himself if this was really the survival life system. Fear and disbelief filled his face. He quickly denied it, whispering that it could not be real. Song-ho quickly grabbed his phone and told himself that if this were real, there would definitely be an article about Yunjumbi. He searched nervously, his eyes fixed on the screen. Just then, a news article appeared, talking about an asteroid called Yunjumbi being monitored by NASA. It said the chance of it approaching Earth was close to 0. His face went pale. He muttered in shock that there really was one. Panic rushed through him. He shook his head again and again, refusing to accept it. Holding his head with one hand, he tried to calm himself and said the name could just be a coincidence. He told himself it was too early to jump to conclusions. But as he stared at the article on his phone, doubt crept back in. In a low voice, he wondered what if it was real after all. Song-ho stood beside the glowing portal and stared at it quietly. He said that if this was really happening, There might be some kind of proof inside. He slowly looked into the portal. The blue light swirled like flowing water, deep and endless. Su Hong stood in front of the portal and stared at the blue light flowing inside it. He thought that if this was really happening, there might be some proof inside. Slowly, he reached his hand toward the portal. Just before touching it, he suddenly stopped. He hesitated, his fingers trembling slightly. A thought crossed his mind. Going in without any plan might be too dangerous. Su Hong Ho pulled his hand back and looked serious, realizing he needed to think carefully before stepping inside, so he decided to test it first. He picked up a ladle and slowly pushed it inside, trying to feel what was on the other side. After a moment, he pulled it back. There was dirt on the ladle. Seeing that, Song Ho relaxed a little. He said that if it was just dirt, then the other side was not a labyrinth, at least. He thought carefully, and said this portal might simply be something like a warp. He wondered if it was teleporting him to somewhere else on Earth. He packed a small bag and looked at the portal again. He said that since he had done a very basic safety check and some preparation, it was time to decide. Standing in front of the glowing blue gate, he wondered if he should go inside. After a moment, he stepped through. In the next instant, his eyes widened. He gasped softly in shock. When he looked around, he found himself in a completely different place. Green trees surrounded him, sunlight filtered through the leaves, and the air felt fresh. The portal stood behind him, glowing quietly. He stared at the scene in disbelief, and wondered if this was really happening. After checking his phone, he noticed there was no signal at all. Because of that, he assumed this place was at least a remote area that people rarely reached. For now, there was no way to confirm where he actually was. He decided that the most important thing was to find proof, so he planned to explore the area and leave markers behind. He took out a pen-like tool and made marks on a tree as a sign. Then he continued walking down the forest path, moving deeper into the area. He wiped sweat from his face and complained that this was exhausting. He wondered why the forest was so big and endless. Feeling tired and irritated, he wished that something would finally appear. Just then, he sensed something behind him. Before he could react, a sharp red beam shot out. He screamed in shock as his body was thrown backward. When he looked up, he froze. A strange white deer stood in front of him, its antlers wide and unnatural. A blue window appeared in the air, showing the name Valley Deer. Seeing the name and the system window, his heart sank. He realized that this place might not be Earth at all, and it scared him for a moment. However, after observing it carefully, he realized it did not seem to be an aggressive animal. Calming himself, he thought that anyway, he still could not say he had found any proof of an apocalypse yet. He felt that it would be a different story if dangerous creatures like stone monkeys or wild boars had appeared. Looking at the strange deer again, he muttered that he had never seen anything called a valley deer in Sura, but from that moment, he had a bad feeling. He admitted to himself that he had sensed it already. He believed this place was closely connected to survival and danger. Still, he told himself it was not certain yet. Even so, he forced himself to ignore that thought. He knew nothing here was clear or guaranteed. He tightened his grip on his weapon and stepped forward. Deep down, he realized the reason he kept denying it was simple. He did not want to accept that a disaster might be coming to humanity. But that small hope did not last long. Soon, he found what he was looking for. A strange tree stood ahead, glowing softly in the forest. A blue system window appeared, showing the name Sun Apple. He stopped and stared at it in silence. Reaching out carefully, he picked up the shining fruit. Holding it in his hand, he swallowed nervously. With an uneasy expression, he muttered that it should be fine. He took a bite of the glowing apple. The taste was strange, but warm energy spread through his body. A blue system window appeared, saying that his stamina had been slightly restored by the sun apple. His eyes widened in shock. He felt the change clearly, and muttered in disbelief. He realized the effect was exactly the same as the sun apple juice sold in the game's cash shop. He let out a dry laugh and cursed under his breath. This was enough to confirm it. As if that was not bad enough, he noticed something else nearby: goblin droppings. Seeing that, his expression turned serious, knowing things were about to get worse. He let out a long breath, trying to calm himself. Holding his head, he told himself that it was time to stop denying it and accept the truth. His chest rose and fell as he steadied his breathing. Slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes hardened, filled with grim certainty. In a low, serious voice, he accepted the conclusion that the end was coming. After turning that strange sense of déjà vu into certainty, He immediately left the portal and started preparing. The first thing he did was take out an old hard drive he had kept and review the early gameplay footage. He remembered that he had only streamed and recorded it because he liked the game. He could not believe it was being used like this now. After searching through the drive, he finally found useful information about an alien asteroid called Yunjom B that fell near Okinawa on July 20th. In an instant, Okinawa was destroyed. People infected by zombie spores slowly turned into zombies. 5 hours later, their bodies began to decay as the Iron Death disease progressed. He looked at the time and date. After calculating it, he realized there were only 32 days left until the apocalypse. Looking at it again, he thought about survival life. He remembered how the game was full of unfriendly and annoying mechanics, and the worst part of all was the Iron Death disease. It was a strange phenomenon that caused all metal to slowly crumble and break apart. Guns, cars, buildings, and machines all became useless. 5 hours after zombie spores spread through an area, the Iron Death disease followed like an aftershock. It swept through cities and towns, destroying everything made of metal. In an instant, human civilization was pushed back to the Stone Age. Later on, the Iron Death disease would slowly fade away. But that depended on the region. The real problem was the time it took. It took anywhere from 6 months to a full year for the disease to fully subside. However, that terrifying Iron Death disease no longer mattered to him. The trait he had obtained was Private Portal. It was only a guess, but he believed the Iron Death disease would not be able to pass through the portal. After finishing his initial analysis, he used all the money he had saved. He bought every kind of survival supply he could find: weapons, food, tools, medicine, and equipment needed to live on his own. After that, he checked the awakened community, while thinking about what to do next. Many people were chatting casually. Some mocked the warnings and asked for proof. Others told everyone to stop talking nonsense. Someone even bragged about using their trait to steal money. Looking at their messages, he frowned. He muttered that they were far too carefree. As soon as morning came, he went out and bought more supplies. On the way back home, he also bought a 60-pound hunting bow through a private sale. As he walked away with the case in hand, a thought suddenly crossed his mind. He wondered if he was overreacting all by himself. Looking up at the sky, he told himself that if nothing happened, then it was fine. At worst, he would just struggle for 2 or 3 years. After finishing his morning errands, he returned home. Then he put up a temporarily closed sign on his shop, so he would not waste any time. He let out a tired sigh, his head feeling heavy. He muttered to himself, confused about why so many things were suddenly happening overnight. Just then, someone called out to him. A young woman stood in front of him and asked if he was closing down the shop. He scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. He explained that he was not closing it, but that the shop was old and needed some remodeling. Hearing that, she smiled brightly and said that he must have made a lot of money. He quickly waved it off and said it was not that much, repeating that the shop was just old. After that, he tried to end the conversation. He said he had something to take care of, and asked to be excused. The woman suddenly spoke again, calling out to him as if she wanted to ask something, but then she stopped herself. She smiled and said it was nothing, telling him she would see him later. She turned around and walked away. He stood there watching her leave, feeling puzzled. He quietly wondered what she had been trying to say. He asked calmly why they wanted to know. He realized it was a situation where he could have easily asked questions, but he chose to stay silent. From now on, there were things he needed to do seriously. Standing in his room, he reached out his hand and opened the portal. He knew his gameplay style very well. He was a planner, someone who created detailed strategies to overcome challenges. Because of that, compared to veteran players, he lacked physical skill. But even so, he understood one thing clearly. With proper planning, he could still survive what was coming. In Sura, stats were not gained by leveling up. They were earned through the results of hunting and exploration. Standing in front of the target, he let out a slow breath. He wondered if this would work. He pulled the bowstring. Suddenly, he froze. Something felt different. He smiled slightly and said that drawing the bow was easier than he thought. Sweat ran down his face as he pulled the string again, thinking that if he could just aim properly, this might really be possible. He raised the bow high, pulled the string to its limit, and steadied his aim. Then he released. The arrow flew out in a wide arc. A loud impact echoed as it struck the target. He stared at his hand in disbelief, and muttered that it felt unreal. He joked to himself, wondering if he had been Legolas in a past life. Looking at his fingers, he quietly admired the talent he was seeing. After calming down, he thought seriously about his limits. He realized he could only draw the bow properly about 5 times at most, but it was still not bad. He decided that starting today, he would focus hard on strength training. After finishing these basic preparations, he moved on to the next step. Standing in the forest with the bow in hand, he thought carefully. From now on, there were 2 things he needed to take care of. The first was to figure out whether he could hunt monsters in his current condition. The second thing he needed to do was build a hideout in this place where he could store his supplies. He reminded himself that until the weapons and supplies he ordered arrived, he would not do anything reckless. He would not try something stupid, like taking over a nest. As he moved through the forest, his eyes landed on glowing fruits hanging from the branches. He reached out and grabbed them, unable to hide his excitement. He laughed and said his luck was insane. After that, he continued preparing for every possible situation and for the future ahead. That was the reason he was able to remain a veteran in Sura. He carefully looked around the area, certain that he had seen it nearby. After searching for a moment, his eyes widened. He had found it. On the ground in front of him were goblin droppings. He focused on them, because there was a simple reason for it. Goblins were monsters that usually lived in groups. Because of that, seeing only a single pile of droppings lying around was strange and abnormal. He looked closely at the droppings and noticed that they were made up of only seeds. That meant the goblin had not been eating properly. Just as he had predicted, there was a high chance this goblin had been kicked out of its group. He decided that he had to find this goblin, no matter what it took. Opportunities like this were rare. It was not often that he got a chance to test himself in a real fight. The sky slowly grew darker as evening came. He noticed the light fading and felt uneasy. Still, hearing wolves howl in the distance told him something important. It meant he was getting closer to the valley. He moved carefully through the forest, staying alert. Suddenly, he froze. Not far ahead, something small and green was crouching near the water. He recognized it immediately. It was a goblin. As he watched closely, he realized it looked exactly like the goblins he had seen before in Sura. He recalled the basic information about goblins. They were low-tier monsters that usually used spears or poison darts. They liked to paralyze their enemies with poison and slowly torment them. That was exactly why he had chosen a bow as his first weapon. Hiding behind the trees, he carefully drew his bow and took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Looking closer, he realized this goblin was different. It was old, and it seemed to have been exiled from its group. More importantly, it was not carrying a poison dart or a spear. He steadied his breathing and reminded himself not to get nervous. As long as he stayed calm, he believed he could hunt it. He released the arrow. The arrow shot straight down and pierced through the goblin's arm. The goblin screamed in pain and thrashed violently. He frowned slightly. He had aimed for the head, but at least the attack had hit. Seeing the opening, he decided not to hesitate. He planned to press the advantage and go for another shot. However, when he moved forward to take another shot, something went wrong. The goblin suddenly threw a stone. It flew straight at him and smashed into his hand. He gritted his teeth and cursed under his breath as pain shot through his arm. The goblin did not retreat. Even with its arm injured, it rushed at him fiercely. Seeing its movements, he realized this goblin was experienced. It was not panicking like a normal weak monster. He quickly dropped the bow and pulled out his blade. The goblin roared and swung its weapon at him. Their attacks collided head-on. The blade and the crude weapon clashed with a loud impact. Both sides pushed forward, neither willing to back down. Sung Ho lunged forward without hesitation, gripping the blade tightly. His eyes were sharp and focused as he swung at the goblin. The goblin twisted its body and barely avoided a fatal hit, but it was still forced back. Sung Ho shouted as he pushed forward, striking again with all his strength. The goblin screeched in pain and rage, refusing to fall. Blood splashed as their attacks collided again and again. Gritting his teeth, Sung Ho cursed the goblin for its stubborn resistance. In the struggle, his knife slipped from his hand and flew away. The goblin seized the chance and slammed into him, forcing him to the ground. They crashed down together, locked in a brutal struggle. The goblin screamed loudly, raising its head to bite. At the last moment, he grabbed his weapon again and drove it straight down. The blade pierced deep into the goblin's body. The goblin let out a final shrill scream as its strength faded. Su Hong collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily. A blue message appeared, telling him that he had gained 2 points. He stared at it for a moment, then laughed weakly. He said he had really done it. After calming down, his eyes fell on a small pouch lying nearby. He picked it up and checked the contents. Inside were guaca powder and vegetable oil. He remembered that in Sora, combining these two could make a simple ointment. He decided to try it later. There was no time to relax. He knew he had to hurry and dig. If the goblins' group found the body, it would be dangerous. He hurried away, knowing he could not leave the body behind. If he did, it would clearly turn into a bone creeper. As he moved through the forest, his eyes caught something unusual. He stopped and looked toward the stream. 2 red trout were swimming calmly in the clear water. He frowned slightly, surprised to see them there. A thought crossed his mind. If this was a valley where red trout lived, then this place might be more special than he first thought. Suddenly, he felt a chill run down his spine. He slowly turned his head, his face stiff with fear. A bad feeling filled his chest, and his breath grew shallow. Behind him stood a massive monster. Its red eyes glowed in the darkness as it stared straight at him. It was an owlbear. Kneeling on the ground, Su Hong swallowed hard and realized the truth. He realized he was completely screwed. His life started flashing before his eyes. He started remembering the days when he used to play the game and live stream. He often used to cover monsters' habits, fighting styles, and behavior. And one of them was owlbears. He remembered explaining that the most dangerous creatures in the forest were werewolves and owlbears. He had pointed out that when an owlbear had already claimed a territory, it meant something important. It meant the monster ecosystem in that area was balanced. Looking back, he felt that those days were truly good times. The chat, which always reacted with excitement, made him laugh. Those familiar comments filled the chat, making the stream feel lively and warm. But suddenly, his thoughts broke apart. He wondered why he was thinking about those happy memories now. His face turned pale, and sweat rolled down his cheek. A strange fear filled his chest. He realized what was happening. It felt like his life was flashing before his eyes. In front of him, the owlbear stood tall. Its red eyes glowed as it slowly raised its sharp claws. Su Hong shook his head and rejected the thought. At least for him, this was not his life flashing before his eyes. It felt more like a flashback of his old friends telling him to calm down and get a grip. His body trembled, but he forced himself to think clearly. He recalled what he knew. Owlbears had a habit of tearing apart anything they saw when they were hungry. But the fact that the owlbear was just standing there meant one thing. It was not hungry. In other words, there was only one thing that was bothering the owlbear. That meant he had entered the owlbear's territory, the place where the red trout lived. Understanding this, his mind became clear. If that was the case, then there was only one way to escape this situation. He knew that in his mind, he was still Kimbap Joa, but his body was Kang Song Ho. Even so, if he wanted to live, he had to do this. He clenched his teeth and shouted, pushing himself forward. The owlbear had the head of an owl, so its night vision was strong. However, it was weak to sunlight. The monster lunged at him, swinging its claws down, but he did not panic. He had memorized its attack patterns long ago. Now, all he had to do was execute them. The owlbear's claw swung down at him. He watched it closely, and knew there was only one timing. The attack passed just past his face, missing him by a hair. That moment was all he needed. He moved instantly and rushed forward. He raised the flashlight in his hand and aimed it straight ahead. He turned it on and shone the light directly into the owlbear's eyes. A sharp beam of light burst out. The owlbear screamed in pain and roared loudly. Its eyes were blinded by the sudden light. After that, the scene shifted to the next day in his room. A sharp ringing sound filled the room. The alarm kept ringing again and again. He slowly opened his eyes and groaned. His whole body ached badly. The ringing continued, making his head throb. He reached out and slapped the alarm clock, finally turning it off. He stared at the time and felt confused. He wondered if he had passed out the moment he escaped. It felt like hours had gone by, and he thought that made sense. Lying there, he let out a tired sigh. As if fighting a goblin was not enough, he had even run into an owlbear. The memory made him shudder. He muttered that he really never wanted to see one again. Just then, his stomach suddenly growled. He realized that he had not eaten anything since yesterday afternoon. Trying to get up, he lost his balance and fell forward, hitting the floor hard. He groaned in pain and lay there for a moment. His legs felt weak, with no strength left in them. Turning his head, he noticed his backpack nearby. He reached out and opened it, then pulled out a yellow apple. Without hesitation, he took a bite. Warm energy spread through his body as he chewed. A soft glow wrapped around him, and his strength slowly returned. He lay back on the bed, breathing out in relief. Feeling the warmth fill him, He thought that he finally felt a bit more alive. After recovering his strength, he smiled to himself and thought that it was time to properly fill his stomach. So he went outside to a restaurant. As he was about to eat, he noticed someone familiar sitting across from him. Seeing her there made him confused. He wondered why Mi-kyung was here. She smiled brightly and explained that she had come to eat. She added that this place was one of her favorite restaurants. Kang Song-ho tried to explain that he meant something else and asked why she was sitting with him. Before he could finish, Mi-kyung cheerfully said that it was nice to have someone to eat with. Hearing that, he could only sit there quietly, unsure how to react. While eating, Mi-kyung casually asked Song-ho if he had ever tried the thing she mentioned before. Song-ho paused and asked if she meant the status window. Her eyes lit up right away, and she excitedly asked if he had tried it. At that moment, Song-ho finally understood why she had stopped herself from talking back then. Mi-kyung leaned forward and said with confidence that she really thought it was real. She even showed him an article on her phone about a strange incident at a convenience store. As Soo-hong listened, he quietly thought that he could not tell whether she was just naive or simply too pure. With a helpless smile, he pointed out that what she wanted to ask was already very obvious. He then answered honestly, saying that he did try it, but unfortunately nothing appeared for him. Although he knew it was a lie, he felt that lying in this situation was completely justified. His trait was not combat-oriented at all. It was a skill meant for solo play, not for working in a team. In a world where his safety was not even guaranteed, revealing his abilities would be extremely dangerous. With a calm expression, he tapped the table lightly as these thoughts passed through his mind. In his eyes, showing his hand was no different from openly telling others to come and kill him in the apocalypse. He noticed that even after everything, Mi-kyung was still asking about awakening. That meant she was one of the awakened. Suddenly Mi-kyung apologized to Kang Song-ho. Looking confused, Kang Song-ho asked what she was apologizing for. She hesitated, then admitted that there was something she had lied about. As he watched her, he quietly thought that Mi-kyung really seemed like a good person. Kang Song-ho looked at her seriously and told her that it was okay. He said she did not have to tell him right now. They still had time. She could tell him later, when she felt brave enough. With those words, he headed back home. When he arrived, packages were being delivered in front of his house. The things he had ordered were finally starting to arrive, one by one. After that, he moved the items he would need later up to the rooftop. The things he needed right away were taken to the second floor. While he was at it, he began preparing seriously. He carefully cut open the boxes and selected the items he would use for today's operation. After laying everything out, his goal for the day became clear. His mission today was to find a place that could be used as a hideout. He gripped the pipe tightly in his hands. No matter what happened, he knew he had to secure a hideout. With his backpack on and tools ready, he moved forward without hesitation. Finding a place to hide was not difficult for him. Earlier, while searching for the old goblin, he had already noticed a strange and suspicious spot. That place now became his target. He looked at the hidden cave covered by plants and vines. To him, it looked absolutely perfect for a hideout. However, he knew the most important thing was to find out what kind of monster lived there. He raised the portable telescope and carefully checked the ground inside. Soon, his eyes caught something. He saw footprints clearly pressed into the dirt. They looked familiar. He realized they were kobold footprints. At that moment, he felt a wave of relief. This was pure luck. He lowered the telescope and smiled sincerely. Even though his plan would work on most low-tier monsters, it was still better to confirm everything. He plucked a small leaf and let it fall to check the wind. After watching its movement, he nodded to himself. The kobolds that lived there were nocturnal, so they would be asleep at this time. For them, what he was about to do would be absolute poison. To carry out his plan, he quickly began gathering firewood. It was tougher than he expected, but he did not stop. After collecting enough, he placed the firewood near the cave entrance. Looking at the pile, he felt it should be enough. Then, without hesitation, he poured gasoline over the firewood. He crouched down and thought that now all he had to do was set it on fire. At that moment, a voice suddenly rang out. Kobolds rushed out from the cave. They had already woken up. When they saw Soo-hong, the kobolds looked shocked to see him standing there. Before they could react properly, he moved. He grabbed the fire axe and charged forward without hesitation. The axe swung through the air in a wide arc and killed the kobolds swiftly. As he looked at the fallen creatures, a thought crossed his mind. Was drowsiness actually a status effect? It seemed like the kobolds had been sluggish from sleep, allowing him to land perfect blows. He was surprised that even now, a one-turn kill was possible. Just then, a blue system window appeared in front of him, telling him that his level had risen to 1 and that he had acquired a total of 4 points. He took a quick breath and glanced at the message. There was no time to celebrate. He decided to think about the details later. For now, he needed to act fast before more kobolds woke up. He pulled out his lighter and dropped it onto the gasoline-soaked firewood. Flames burst to life, spreading quickly. Inside the cave, the fire crackled, and smoke began to rise. In the game Sura, all low-tier monsters had one thing in common. They were extremely weak against sudden changes. Although burning them alive would have been more effective, as the new owner of this place, that would make cleaning up later very troublesome. Because of that, he chose a different method. He decided to weaken them first. The smoke made their eyes sting and their heads dizzy, making it easier for him to kill the monsters. Inside the cave, the kobolds shouted loudly and screamed. They stumbled around, coughing and roaring in confusion. This was exactly what Kang Song-ho wanted. By throwing them into chaos, he could control the fight. Soon, kobolds rushed outside one after another, coughing and stumbling. This was exactly what Kang Song-ho had been waiting for. When they came out, his plan was to finish them all at once. He watched carefully and frowned slightly. He had expected at least 5 to appear, since a kobold pack usually had 7, but fewer came out than he thought. As he counted quickly, he realized how many were left. Only 3 remained. Without hesitation, he moved. One kobold was struck down instantly, green blood splashing across the ground. The remaining kobolds roared angrily and charged at him through the smoke. Their eyes were wild, their movements clumsy, but their killing intent was clear. Kang Song-ho raised the axe high and brought it down with full force. The blade cut through the air and slammed into a kobold, green blood splashing out. Before he could pull the axe back, another kobold rushed at him from the side, screaming loudly. He dropped low and rolled forward, narrowly avoiding its claws. The kobolds surrounded him, attacking together. In one swift motion, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a spray can. He aimed it straight at the charging kobold's face and pressed down hard. A powerful jet burst out and hit the kobold directly in the eyes. The creature screamed in pain and staggered back, blinded and confused. Kang Song-ho used that opening to regain his footing. Before it could finish shouting, the axe came down. The blade split through its body, and green blood sprayed into the air. Kang Song-ho tightened his grip on the pipe and looked ahead. Only one kobold was left. He spoke calmly, saying that now it was the last one standing. The remaining kobold trembled. Its body shook as it stepped back, fear clear in its eyes. He watched it closely and coldly thought that the leader was trembling in fear. He raised his weapon and ended it with a single strike. As the final blow landed, he looked at the cave and decided that the hideout now belonged to him. He sat down on the ground and let out a long breath. The fight was finally over, but his body felt extremely heavy. Dealing with them was not that hard, but because he had no stamina, it was truly exhausting. As he rested, he realized that it was just like the game. The exhaustion debuff was clearly active. A blue status window appeared in front of him. It showed that he was now level 1, but his health, strength, agility, dexterity, and perception were all lowered. The listed effect was exhaustion. Looking at it, he thought about how strange it was. Even after leveling up, he did not gain any status points. Still, he knew that leveling up unlocked convenience systems. Because of that, today's reward was still important. As he looked at the newly unlocked menus floating before him, he quietly accepted the result. More than anything else, he now had a secure place, a space that only he could use. Looking up, he smiled faintly, satisfied with the result. After that, he stood up and turned toward the cave to look at his new hideout. However, the inside was messy, filled with broken wood and scattered debris. He let out a tired breath and stood there for a moment. Then he accepted reality. Before resting, he would have to clean the nest first. After obtaining a hideout, Kang Song-ho immediately started cleaning it. The place was deep underground, about 15 meters down. For a hermitage, it was on the small side. Maybe because it was right after a big fight, the condition inside was especially bad. While cleaning, he felt disgusted and complained that it was filthy. Even so, he kept working. It was the hardest work he had ever done. As he cleaned up the mess left behind, he got angry and cursed the kobolds for not cleaning after themselves. Still, now that he had a safe space in the other world, things were different. He opened the dimensional gate and began using its abilities freely. By moving items through the gate, the cleaning became a little easier. However, He was so tired that he felt like he might pass out at any moment. Even while working, he sighed to himself and thought about how hard his life had become. Still, he continued cleaning without stopping. While traveling between dimensions, he discovered something surprising. He learned that he could fix the coordinates of both the other world and reality. Because of that, objects could interact with each other even when they were between both worlds. When he tried it, water actually flowed through the dimensional gate. Seeing this, he was shocked and excited that it really worked. After finishing the cleaning, he stood there and looked around. The hideout looked much better than before. Although he needed to remove the bloodstains everywhere and pour concrete on the ground so he could store things properly. However, Kang Song-ho knew the mortar work would take a few days. After that, he still had to install the sandwich panels as well. While thinking about it, he suddenly paused in confusion. That was when he noticed the stones embedded in the cave walls. They were luminous stones and ignition stones. One gave off light, while the other could create fire. Seeing them, he was amazed. These were essential items for beginners in Seora. Holding the stones in his hands, he realized this place was a complete gold mine. With a smile on his face, he decided that once the construction preparations were finished, he would start mining right away. The next day arrived. Outside the snack bar, he let out a long groan. Inside, he bent forward, breathing heavily. Yesterday, he had pushed himself too hard. Because of that, his whole body ached, and there was not a single place that did not hurt. When he raised his arm, he froze. He noticed many small cuts on his skin, and wondered when he had gotten all of them. Still, it was not serious enough to need a sun apple right away. He decided to test something else first. He thought about making an ointment to see if it would work. Holding the ingredients in his hands, he realized the method for making the ointment was actually very simple. He mixed guaca powder and vegetable oil together in a 5:5 ratio. He poured them into a bowl and kept stirring until the mixture slowly hardened. As he worked, a small smile appeared on his face. The result was a fairly useful ointment that could slightly heal wounds. For someone who worked in a kitchen before, making this was easy. He tested it by spreading the ointment on his arm. After a moment, he could clearly feel the healing effect. It was working. However, as Kang Song-ho looked at it closely, he frowned. Using something like this every time felt a bit troublesome. To raise his stats, he knew he had to keep doing what he was doing now. Still, as memories of dangerous fights flashed through his mind, he quietly worried that if things continued like this, he might die before the disaster even arrived. He sat quietly and thought things through. A sling was smaller than a bow and depended heavily on the terrain. Even a gun could only take down 1 or 2 enemies at the very beginning. None of those options felt reliable enough. Something suddenly came to mind. He remembered that what he knew about Seora so far was not even the main story. It was only a background story. But would that background story really happen in reality? He stepped into the room and looked around. After thinking for a moment, he decided that the information was not completely useless. If the same preliminary events from the background story really did occur, it would benefit him in many ways, so it was worth checking out. After making a plan, Kang Song-ho went up to the rooftop as scheduled to prepare for the construction work. Fortunately, the bags of mortar he had ordered the night before were already piled up properly. Because of that, the work went smoothly. After that, he went down to the first floor to pick up the items he had ordered. He was just about to move the pile of packages when someone suddenly called out to him. Mi-kyung greeted him cheerfully in the afternoon. Hearing her voice, Kang Song-ho paused and turned his head, wondering if she had come closer or if her address had changed. Mi-kyung looked at Kang Song-ho and said that she had been seeing him a lot lately. Kang Song-ho was holding a box and looked at her in confusion. He let out a small sound, not understanding at first. Mi-kyung explained that she had been coming to eat tteokbokki every day, which was why she kept running into him. Hearing that, Kang Song-ho laughed awkwardly and apologized. He said he had been very busy lately because of the store remodeling. Mi-kyung looked at him carefully and commented that he really did look busy. Kang Song-ho paused for a moment, unsure what she meant. When he asked, she smiled and reminded him that he used to come in for a haircut once every 3 months. Realizing she was right, Kang Song-ho nodded and said that was true. Mi-kyung brightened up and suggested that since they were talking about it, he could get a haircut now. Kang Song-ho thought about it and decided it was not a bad idea. He needed a haircut for the upcoming exploration anyway. With a relaxed smile, he agreed and said they should do that. After that, both of them went to Mi-kyung's hair salon. Standing behind him, Mi-kyung asked Kang Song-ho how he wanted his hair cut. Sitting in the chair with long hair covering his shoulders, he answered calmly that he wanted everything chopped off. She was startled and asked why. He explained that he wanted to shave it all off to mark a new beginning. Hearing that, Mi-kyung understood and smiled. She said that if that was the case, she would cut it as nicely as she could. She picked up the spray bottle and scissors and began working. While cutting his hair, she suddenly mentioned that his shoulders seemed to have gotten broader. Kang Sung-ho sounded a little surprised and said that he had started working out recently, so it must be showing. She nodded, and then added that she had heard something interesting. She said it seemed the status window was related to something called survival life. Hearing that, Kang Sung-ho quietly responded, clearly paying close attention to what she had just said. She continued cutting and said that awakeners were said to be people who had played that game at least once. Hearing that, Kang Sung-ho looked shocked and asked if it was really true. He then asked her where she had gotten that information. Mi-kyung hesitated for a moment, looking a little flustered, and started to explain. At that moment, someone suddenly appeared. A blond man walked in and asked why she was surprised to see him at that hour. He said he came because he had some information to share. Seeing this blonde-haired man, Kang Sung-ho remembered that this was the man he had once fought with over loud singing. The man continued speaking and explained that someone seemed to be trying to monopolize information. Because of that, the person had deleted all his videos and run away. Hearing this, Mi-kyung reacted in shock and asked if that was really true. The blonde-haired man told Mi-kyung that their group was currently trying to find out where that person lived. Mi-kyung looked uneasy and asked if that was not illegal. The blonde man spoke honestly and called her name. He asked if they were really in a position to be picky right now. He said that catching the person who was hiding information and then sharing it was for the public good. She still hesitated and said it did not feel right. From the chair, Kang Sung-ho felt a bad feeling rise in his chest. He realized they were talking about him and that they were looking for him. The blonde man told Mi-kyung that she needed to be bold. He then asked if she had finished thinking about joining their team. Mi-kyung hesitated and told him that she had not decided yet. Meanwhile, sitting quietly, Kang Sung-ho thought that the whole situation felt ridiculous. In his mind, he recalled deleting the video only because he felt disappointed at the time. He never even thought about monopolizing information. He did not even have time to think about something like that. The blonde man clicked his tongue in annoyance and said she was frustrating. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders and confidently said everything was progressing exactly like Seora. Watching this, Kang Sung-ho felt disgusted by the way the man acted as if he knew everything. The blonde man sneered and said that if that guy had just posted the information in the first place, none of this would be happening. He warned Mi-kyung that he could not wait much longer. Hearing this, Kang Sung-ho wondered what would happen if the community really turned against him and cursed him. If that happened, he did not know what to do. A question echoed in his thoughts. He wondered if he should be the one to share the information instead. The blonde man urged her to make a decision quickly. At that moment, Kang Sung-ho finally stepped forward. He calmly said that he did not know what they were talking about, and asked if they could discuss it later. The blonde man's eyes widened in shock. He turned sharply and started to speak, asking who that person thought he was talking to. Kang Sung-ho stepped closer, his eyes cold. He warned the blonde man to leave while he was still being polite. He added that this was a chance to walk away before things turned ugly again. The blonde man froze. Sweat formed on his face as fear crept into his eyes. He let out a nervous sound and realized that today was not his day. He muttered that he would leave and turned toward the door. As he walked out, he forced a stiff goodbye. Once he was gone, Mi-kyung finally relaxed and let out a long breath. Her shoulders dropped as the tension faded. After a moment, Kang Sung-ho spoke again. He gently called her name and suggested that they exchange phone numbers, just in case. He smiled lightly and told her that the blonde man was a bad person. After that, he came back home. He put the construction work aside for a while and turned on his computer. Under the excuse of information monopoly, the online community had exploded. The real-time boards were filled with angry messages. People were shocked that all the videos had been deleted and cursed the person who posted them. Some threatened to kill him if they found out where he lived. Others asked hackers to expose him and even offered rewards. The screen was flooded with insults and abuse aimed at him. The person who had shared the important early information was now receiving nothing but hate. He scrolled further and saw one of his old posts. It was a guide titled Early Game Honey Tips. The post explained zombie behavior, weak points, and safe floors in buildings. Even under that post, people were still attacking him. They mocked him, doubted him, and demanded proof of his playtime. Finally, he noticed an ID that seemed to belong to the same group of people. He clicked on it and saw the name displayed on the screen. He frowned and muttered that the person was crazy. wondering why someone would even verify their real name just to make a nickname. The posts became even worse. They were no longer just cursing him. Some comments talked about finding him, while others mentioned doing something to Jung Mi-kyung. Reading that, his expression darkened. He called them filthy in his mind. Unable to stand it anymore, he turned off the computer. A deep sense of disgust toward people settled in his chest. Still, he knew it was not because he was broken mentally. He was simply tired of people like them. But then something changed. As he sat there, his hand rested on the chair, and he suddenly felt strange. It was as if his mind was becoming clear. He wondered why his head felt lighter and calmer than before. At that moment, a thought surfaced in his mind. He reached out and opened the dimensional gate. For the next 2 days, he fully focused on working on the hideout. He mined luminous stones and ignition stones with a pickaxe. After that, he mixed mortar with water and poured it onto the ground. He spread it carefully and smoothed it out evenly with a tool, making sure there were no rough spots left. Once the work was done, he stepped outside. He came out to wait for the mortar to dry, letting the quiet air surround him as he took a short break. As he looked at the moon blooming in the dark sky, a thought came to him. His hand slowly clenched into a fist. He thought that when faced with injustice, it was fine to answer it with injustice. He knew he was not a hero. He was just an ordinary person, so he did not need any grand sense of mission. In the end, he understood one simple thing. He only needed to survive. When he made that decision and turned around to go back, something happened. A sharp cracking sound came from behind him. He slowly looked back, his eyes narrowing. At that moment, the bone creeper appeared. The skeleton stepped out of the dark, its red eyes glowing as its bones made loud cracking sounds while it moved closer. Seeing it, he cursed under his breath. A sudden blast of force swept through the area. Kang Sung-ho was thrown back and crashed onto the ground. His body rolled across the dirt as dust and small stones scattered. He coughed hard and tried to push himself up, his face full of pain and shock. He shouted in confusion, not understanding what had just happened. The wind slowly faded. He knelt on the ground, holding his head as his ears rang. When the dust settled, broken bones lay on the ground in front of him. Kang Sung-ho looked down at his shaking hand and felt confused. He could not understand how he was still alive. When he remembered what had happened, he saw the bone creeper in his mind. By the time he noticed it, the creature was already about to explode. He had no time to think. He had turned and run with everything he had. A huge blast went off behind him. The shockwave threw him into the air and sent him flying far away. He crashed hard onto the ground, barely surviving. Now, sitting there in pain, he understood the truth. Kang Sung-ho raised his hand and opened the status window. It showed that his health was very low, and all his stats had dropped. But there were no torn muscles or broken organs. When he saw that his level and points had gone up, he understood what it meant. The system had counted the bone creeper as defeated. His head started to hurt badly. He grabbed it, feeling dizzy and confused. He quickly opened the dimensional gate and went back to his house. After coming back, he started treating his wounds right away. He placed his medical supplies on the table and sat down in front of them. One by one, he carefully pulled the sharp bone pieces out of his skin. His teeth clenched as pain spread through his body. After that, he rubbed healing ointment over the wounds to stop the bleeding. It burned badly, and he let out a painful breath. When the bleeding slowed, he wrapped his arm and body with a bandage and checked his condition. His vision became blurry, and his strength slowly faded. In the end, Kang Sung-ho collapsed onto the couch and fell asleep from exhaustion. The next day, morning light filled the room as Kang Sung-ho lay on the couch, still wrapped in bandages. He slowly opened his eyes and felt weak all over. For a moment, he thought he was really going to die like this. Sitting up, he realized he should have checked whether the ointment worked before falling asleep, so he quickly opened his status window. His status window showed that his health had gone up, and his body was stable. Seeing that, he finally felt relieved. Kang Sung-ho let out a slow breath, knowing the medicine had worked. Then he started to think about what had happened last night. He wondered where the bone creeper had come from. However, he knew that the forest was huge, so it was not strange for dangerous things to suddenly appear. After this accident, Kang Sung-ho realized that his perception stat was too low, so he needed to raise it to notice danger faster. He remembered how the game Serora worked. There were two main ways to become stronger. The first way was to gain experience and earn stat points by fighting and leveling up. The second way was to get special items that had stats on them. But he also knew that Serora was a very harsh game, Getting good items was very hard because everything was random. In his mind, he recalled how players fought monsters again and again, hoping to finally get something useful. He also remembered that strong monsters could have special skills, and if the right conditions were met, those skills could be obtained. Although he needed items with stats, he did not know where to get them right now. To find the answer, Kang Song-ho decided to check the game's background story that he remembered. He turned on his device and opened the game menu. The background story explained what happened before the silver rain fell. He remembered that if someone was lucky, it was possible to get special items before the apocalypse even began. But this would only happen if those early strange events occurred in the real world. During those events, strong monsters would start to appear. After carefully reading the background story for a long time, he learned that there were 3 early events before the real disaster. The last one was about a Russian ship. Before that there was something called the Hobgoblin, but there was no clear information about it. Then he saw a report on the screen. It said that on June 26th at 5 p.m., an orc's body was found near Jungsan-ri campground on Jirisan Mountain. The news was quickly deleted by the government, so almost no one knew about it. Kang Song-ho understood that the Jirisan orc incident was the very first event. He checked the time again, and realized that if the orc was found on the afternoon of the 26th, it must have been alive earlier that day. So he decided that he had to leave on the night of the 25th to reach the place by morning. As he was about to prepare things for this, his phone suddenly started to ring. It was Mi-kyung. Kang Song-ho looked at the screen and wondered why she was calling him at this hour. The scene then shifted to a cafe called Starbin, where Mi-kyung was already sitting, waiting for him. When she saw him, she looked worried and asked if he was okay. She said his face looked strange and that he was wearing long sleeves even though the weather was hot. Kang Song-ho gave a small laugh and said that he just did not feel the heat much. Mi-kyung kept watching him closely. She wondered if something had happened before. She asked if it was because his haircut appointment had been delayed because of Oh In-huk last time. Kang Song-ho quickly said that was not the reason. Hearing that, Mi-kyung felt relieved. She said she was honestly a little scared because of how he had looked earlier. Kang Song-ho laughed softly and said that even though he joked, it was true that he really did not like that man. He explained that the man had once caused trouble with an illegally modified tow truck. He had even picked a fight with a weak old man, showing how bad his character was. Mi-kyung was shocked and said she had no idea he was that kind of person. Kang Song-ho told her it made sense that she did not know because that man always caused problems late at night or early in the morning. Then Kang Song-ho asked her why she had called him to meet today. Mi-kyung hesitated and nervously said she wanted to talk to him about something. She leaned closer and whispered to him that she was an awakener. Hearing that, Kang Song-ho was stunned and wondered why she was telling him something like that. Kang Song-ho decided to just go along with what Mi-kyung said for now. He smiled and joked that he was jealous because he had not awakened yet. Mi-kyung quickly apologized and said she felt bad for lying to him. Kang Song-ho told her it was fine and that he did not misunderstand her. He said he knew she was not that kind of person. Then he thanked her for always sharing information and talking to him. He leaned forward and said that because of her, he felt a little better. He also admitted that he had been stressed because of the house remodeling, but he was glad he had come to meet her. Before leaving, he told her that he would see her again in survival life. He said he was thinking about studying the game more seriously now. After that, he came back home. Sitting on his bed, he thought to himself that he really needed to meet more good people. Feeling much better, he sat there and looked at his phone, wondering what to do next. He rented a high-tech drone to scout the forest. He also rented a car to use for the remaining time. After that, he decided to sleep so his body could recover and reach its best condition. The next day, as soon as the sun rose, Kang Song-ho started preparing materials for the orc hunt. Inside the cave, he sat at a work table and began crushing the ignition stones. It was dangerous work, so he had to be very careful while doing it. He knew that if he struck it the wrong way, a flame could burst out. As he hit it, sparks flew, and a small fire suddenly appeared. He was surprised, but he kept working. Next he picked up the luminous stones. They glowed brightly in his hand, and the light kept flashing, making his eyes hurt. Even though it was uncomfortable, he endured it because the results were good. After finishing the basic preparation for the orc hunt, several jars and materials were placed on the table. There were different colored powders and bottles arranged neatly. He began pouring different liquids and powders into containers, mixing them together. Then he added another liquid that made everything become solid. The materials slowly came together, forming what he needed for the hunt. After that, a desk was set up where the dimensional gate's coordinates had been fixed. Then he stepped back into the real world. He prepared all the supplies and placed them inside the car. Standing there, he raised his hand and looked around in surprise. He softly reacted as he took a look at all the supplies. He smiled and felt satisfied. He was glad he had rented a good car. He felt that everything he needed was already prepared. Kang Song-ho sat in the driver's seat and smiled. Now it was time to get going. He headed toward Jurisan, the place where the orc would appear. Before midnight, the car arrived at the Yungsan-ri camping ground parking lot. Rain poured down heavily, soaking the area. With the remaining time, he did some image training while sitting inside the car. On his phone screen, he watched how he was facing an orc in the game. After that, he checked his equipment. He reached into the car and made sure everything was in place. Exactly as the next day began, and the clock showed the early morning hour, he stepped out into the rain, now wearing a hooded raincoat. He had a flashlight on his head. He began searching seriously. The rain grew heavier, drumming loudly around him. He muttered in annoyance, and noticed that the weather was getting worse as he continued forward. On top of everything else, mist spread through the area, blocking his view. He could not see clearly in front of him. As he walked through the wet ground, he wondered where the orc would appear. He was sure he had already checked the entire camping ground. He remembered the scene of people gathered around a fallen creature. Just as expected, strange signs were appearing in reality. He raised his hand slightly, feeling uneasy, as if something was about to happen. Before he could finish his thought, a sudden sound rang out. A sharp warning echoed through the rain. He suddenly stopped. Hearing the sound, his eyes widened in shock. Through the heavy rain and mist, a huge shadow slowly appeared. Red light glowed from its eyes as it stepped forward. He immediately recognized that it was an orc, not just an ordinary one, but a red orc, a rare subspecies. Seeing it clearly, his heart raced. He realized that defeating it might guarantee a skill drop. He took a deep breath and told himself to stay calm. His hands tightened around the red flare stick. Flames burst out from it, lighting up the rain. He stepped forward with a steady gaze, thinking that as long as he followed the plan, he could catch it. The red orc walked closer through the mist, weapon in hand. The confrontation had begun. His strategy for dealing with the orc was as follows. First, he used the orc's aggression to draw its attention. With a sharp motion, he threw the flare forward. The red light spun through the air and landed on the ground ahead. The orc noticed it immediately. Attracted by the bright signal, it turned its body toward the flare. Rain poured down as the orc stepped closer, gripping its weapon tightly. Its eyes glowed red with anger. The moment the orc attacked it, for a brief moment, the orc's movement stopped. Its attention was fully focused on the flare glowing on the ground. That was the opening he was waiting for. Song-ho rushed forward, stretched out his hand, and shouted to open his portal. Then he slipped between the orc's legs. At the same time, a blue portal opened on the ground in front of him, glowing brightly in the rain. While sliding, he entered the portal. But before entering the portal, he reached into his clothes and took out a flash can that was already burning. Before the orc could react, the orc's face brightened with a flash as Song-ho activated the flash can and threw it toward the orc. A blinding blue light exploded in front of the orc's face. The light flooded the area, cutting through the rain and mist. The orc let out a loud roar as it was hit by the flash, covering its eyes as pain spread through its head. It screamed as its vision was stolen by the flash. Su-hong knew that until the orc's vision returned, he had about 20 seconds. He took out a knife and lit up another flash can. From that moment on, it became a battle against time. Sparks flew as the flame burned steadily. He moved forward without hesitation. His target was clear. First, he had to rupture the orc's muscles. The orc staggered, its body tense and unstable. The status effect on its muscles weakened it, slowing its movements. In the next instant, he struck. Green energy burst from his blade as it cut into the orc's body. The slash landed deep, tearing into its flesh. The orc let out a painful scream. Its eyes glowed red with rage as blood sprayed into the rain. Even blinded and injured, the orc swung its weapon wildly. A red arc cut through the air as it attacked in fury. Su-hong-ho lowered his body and narrowly avoided the attack. His eyes stayed calm as he held the knife tightly. In the next moment, he rushed forward. A blue arc flashed as his blade cut into the orc's leg. Green energy burst out where the strike landed. The orc let out a painful cry. Its mouth opened wide as it roared in agony. Its body staggered, unable to keep its balance. The injured leg gave out, and it dropped to one knee. Rain poured down as the orc struggled to move. Su Hong did not stop. He quickly closed the distance. When his eye level roughly matched the orc's, he acted. He pulled out the prepared flame can and raised his arm. The fuse was already burning as sparks flew. He lunged forward without hesitation. He grabbed the flame can and forced it straight into the orc's open mouth. The orc's sharp teeth snapped shut as the can was shoved deep inside. A split second later, a massive explosion erupted from the orc's head. Fire burst outward in all directions. The orc's body shook violently as the blast tore through it. Su Hong stepped back, rain pouring down around him. He looked at the burning remains and calmly asked how that felt. He said that even an orc could not survive something like that. At that moment, a powerful fist suddenly smashed into his side. The impact sent him flying across the ground. He rolled and crashed hard, coughing as he struggled to breathe. He lay there in the rain, his body aching. Sweat ran down his face as he clenched his teeth. He muttered in frustration that letting his guard down like that was a stupid mistake. The orc was still standing. Its entire upper body was covered in raging flames. Fire wrapped around its muscles as smoke rose into the rain-filled air. It slowly stepped forward, its body still moving despite the blast. Seeing this, Song-ho cursed under his breath. Rain ran down his face as sweat mixed with it. His eyes widened slightly. For a brief moment, fear flashed through his mind. He wondered if he was really going to die like this. But before anything else could happen, another sound rang out. It was the orc that fell to the ground. The flames surged violently, swallowing the orc completely. Its body was finally consumed by fire. Blue system windows appeared in the air. Su Hong's level increased to 3. He obtained 10 points. Another message appeared, informing him that he had acquired the skill Survival Instinct. He raised his hands weakly and stared at the screens in silence. After a moment, he let out a long breath. He said he seriously could not keep doing things like this. The fire continued to crackle beside him as rain fell. He slowly stood up and looked around, wondering where the dropped item was. Just then, a blue system window appeared in front of him. The watch appeared on his arm as his perception increased by 2. Seeing this, he let out a breath of relief. With the heavy rain falling, it would have been hard to find anything, but the watch had appeared on its own. He then glanced down at the orc's remains and wondered what he should do with the body now. He thought that the Mount Jiri orc incident was clearly under embargo. He questioned whether releasing this information was the right thing to do. His expression turned serious. He recalled what Miss McKine had said before. She had mentioned that awakened people were those who had played that game at least once. If that was true, then at least several thousand people had already awakened. The thought made his chest feel heavy. He imagined a crowd of awakened people surrounding him. He thought that even if only half of them, no, even if it was just a small minority of the people were like Oh In Hak, there was a high chance they would destroy the system for personal gain and incite riots. But Su Hong-ho thought that the biggest problem was that if he left this corpse, the body would turn into a bone creeper and harm people as soon as tomorrow. Suddenly, he paused. A thought struck him. He wondered why he had never considered that he himself could turn into a zombie. He realized that even if he was awakened, there was no guarantee he would not turn into a zombie if infected by spores. Rain continued to fall as he curled up on the ground, overwhelmed. He asked himself what the right choice was. In the end, he admitted that he could not bring himself to make a decision right then and there, but one thing was certain. He raised his hand and shouted for the portal to open. A portal opened in front of him, glowing blue in the rain. He knew that even for the sake of the few who would survive, the world needed to face an orderly end. Thinking that, he dragged the orc's corpse into the other world. He sighed in frustration and slammed a shovel into the ground. Annoyed, he picked up the shovel and started digging. He complained about how miserable his life had become. He complained about having to dig and bury the body himself. His body trembled from exhaustion and pain. He shouted that if his body were fine, he would not be living such a miserable life. Just then, a system alert appeared. Skill Survival Instinct activates due to exhaustion. Will to fight, stamina regeneration, health regeneration, and perception increase significantly. Golden light wrapped around him. He shouted in anger, gripping the shovel tightly. He decided to end it quickly. No more hesitation. He really had no choice but to move as fast as possible because at a glance, Survival Instinct looked like a broken, overpowered skill. But once the effect wore off, it would take time for the body to recover and move again. He ran through the forest, barely holding on. He opened the portal to return to the human world. Outside, it was almost morning. He jumped into his car, and at full speed he returned to his home, while survival instinct was still active. At dawn, on a quiet street, Su Hong's shop stood there, untouched by the chaos. Inside, he stood in the room. He looked at the sky turning dark and muttered in surprise, wondering if the time had already come. He looked at his phone and thought about the schedule. According to it, he should have already started building the defensive line by now. He stared at the screen again and thought that at least the traces of the red orc should be completely gone. A news article was displayed on his phone. It talked about abnormal climate conditions at Mount Jiri and mentioned heavy rain that lasted from dawn until morning. He lowered the phone and thought to himself that it was an awkward time to do anything today. So he opened the door and stepped into the room, wondering if he should check the community and look at the supplies that arrived in the morning. He grabbed the wooden box and opened it. Suddenly, a startled cry slipped out of him. Inside were weapons neatly placed together, blades, tools, and sharp equipment. His expression changed instantly. He smiled brightly and said that this was it. He picked up the Indian war club and looked at it carefully. He thought that for now, in reality, this was the only weapon he could use. Still, he felt it was not too bad, because in the other world, he could use everything without limits. But as he looked at the box again, he frowned slightly. It felt like a few things were missing, and he wondered why. He picked up a notice from the box and read it. It said that customs clearance had been denied for some weapons he ordered, including a spear, because they were classified as weapons. Seeing this, he was not surprised. He thought that even when buying from a weapon importer, some items would still get stopped by customs. Suddenly, his doorbell rang. He wondered if it was another delivery. He quickly replied, and told the driver to just leave it in front. But the doorbell rang again. He looked toward the door and frowned, wondering if the driver had not heard him. He stood up and walked to the door, reaching for the doorknob. But just as he opened the door, he froze for a moment, his eyes widening in surprise. A confused sound slipped out of his mouth. He wondered why Miss McKyoung was here. She stood in front of him, looking nervous. She apologized softly and said it had been a long time since they last met. She explained that she really wanted to talk to him today. She hesitated for a moment, gripping the bag in her hands. Then she spoke again, asking if he would be okay with it. She lifted the bag slightly and looked up at him, blushing. She asked if he wanted to eat rabaki together. Miss Mi-kyung stood inside Song-ho's house, smiling gently as she placed a hot meal in front of him. Song-ho stared at her in surprise. He wondered if Miss Mi-kyung was really inside his house right now. It sounded ridiculous, yet he couldn't help thinking about it. Miss Mi-kyung told him to hurry and eat. Song-ho obediently replied that he was eating, but then asked what she wanted to talk about. Miss Mi-kyung hesitated before explaining that he had said to look into So-la last time, so she wanted to share some information. Hearing that, Song-ho felt like crying. He knew it. His romance's end was just around the corner. Even though he felt uneasy, he decided that since it was Miss Mi-kyung, it was only right to tell her what he knew. Looking at Miss Mi-kyung's face, he believed that good people were necessary in the apocalypse. After finishing his meal, Miss Mi-kyung said she would quickly throw out the trash and come back. Su Hong-ho nodded and said he would get ready while waiting. While she was away, Su Hong-ho brought out his laptop. He believed that gathering information from the community was the best way to help, while hiding the fact that he was awakened. He began by explaining the metal death plague. He shared that traveling in groups of 6 or more increased the chances of being detected by zombies and monsters. He also explained that perception was the most important stat for survival. Miss Mi-kyung listened carefully and wrote everything down in her notebook. She noted that sturdy buildings were safe up to the 8th floor and that perception ability was essential. Song-ho agreed, saying that since the goal of the game was survival, perception must be the most important stat. Song-ho continued searching for more information online, but suddenly Miss Mi-kyung mentioned that Kimbap Lover was being criticized a lot lately. She wondered why he wasn't sharing information. Song-ho replied that, as someone who hadn't played the game, he didn't really know. He then asked if she had any guesses. Miss Mi-kyung thought for a moment and said everyone had their own reasons and circumstances. Then, with a calm smile, the woman casually revealed that she had rejected Oh In-hak's offer to join his party. When Sung-ho asked why, she explained that she had met his party members and didn't like what she saw. She gave him her phone, where she had recorded them. On the recording, Oh In-hak's group talked among themselves, suggesting kidnapping Miss Mi-kyung if she kept playing hard to get. Another voice told them to wait, saying she would come soon anyway. Someone cursed, calling their leader a trash bastard. Hearing that recording, Su-hong got furious, calling them bastards. With a serious look, he told Miss McCune that if a catastrophe truly came and the rule of law collapsed, many people would reveal their true colors. So he warned her not to trust anyone. But instead of backing away, she turned the question back to him, asking what about him could he be trusted. Then, without hesitation, she made a proposal, telling Su-hong that she wanted to form a party with him. Caught off guard by her sudden offer, he couldn't respond immediately. Silence filled the room as Su-hong thought carefully. One of his biggest goals was to reach level 10 and unlock the shop before the tutorial ended. However, that created a serious problem. In the original game, there existed a system in which the rank of monsters that spawned changed according to a person's level. So it was clear that if she followed Su-hong while he leveled up rapidly, the monsters would grow stronger as well. And if that happened, she would die a miserable death just by staying at his side. Trying to lighten the mood, Su-hong joked and thanked her for the offer, asking what would happen if he became a zombie. Mi-kyung laughed and replied that it would still be fine. Just as she said that, she used her awakened power. She immediately teleported from where she was standing and appeared behind Su-hong. She turned and told him that her trait was blink, so she just had to dodge before he bit her. Su-hong, who was shocked seeing that. He warned her not to reveal such things so casually. Mi-kyung answered honestly. She had shown it only because it was him. It was her way of showing trust. Then she smiled warmly and said that if both of them survived and didn't become zombies, she hoped they could work together. Even if they couldn't form a party, she still wished for cooperation between them. Then, after she left, Su-hong returned to his sub-dimension. Su-hong focused on building his defenses. The method to build the fence was not difficult. He stood in the forest and calmly checked the materials he had prepared. After planning everything carefully, he began working step by step. He set up support posts and hammered them into the ground. He wrapped barbed wire tightly around them and secured everything firmly. Then he installed infrared sensors across the area. After completing the defensive line, he admired the result and wondered if all that work should at least give him 1 point in dexterity. With the barrier finished and the mortar work done, he looked around the area and prepared for the next step, ready to move the remaining supplies. Soon after, he entered his cave-like shelter filled with stacked boxes and supplies. He looked around and nodded to himself, satisfied that he had moved everything he needed for now. Next, he thought about dividing the area, using sandwich panels to complete the internal layout. Just as he was planning further, a sudden chill ran through his body. He sneezed loudly. Shivering slightly, he realized the other world felt cold, almost like late autumn weather. If he had to sleep here soon, he would definitely need to prepare proper countermeasures. Looking at a portable heater, he began thinking of ways to keep the place warm. At the same time, he decided he should make a proper door for the entrance instead of relying on a simple blackout curtain. He wrote this task in his notebook. Standing there with a small notebook and pen in hand, he looked at his growing list of tasks and laughed awkwardly. Somehow, his to-do list kept getting longer. After stopping by a nearby woodworking shop to request production and purchase various items, he walked back through the quiet streets, checking his list carefully for the places to loot within the 5 hours before the metal death plague spread. There was the hardware store first, then the pharmacy, after that, the motorcycle shop. Muttering to himself as he reviewed the plan, he suddenly heard a familiar voice call out his name. He looked up. A muscular man stood nearby, waving with a friendly grin. Song recognized him as Hyungjun. This man was Oh Hyungjun, a gym director known as the Protein Monster. A divorced man raising a young daughter. Noticing his tense expression, Su-hong asked Hyungjun if something was wrong. He looked exhausted. Hyungjun casually replied that a lot was going on, then asked if Su-hong had started working out again. Hyungjun looked at his body, saying it looked like the muscle memory he had engraved in Su-hong was coming back. Hearing that, Su-hong laughed and told Hyungjun that he had been using his body a bit lately due to remodeling. After a brief laugh, Su-hong asked what was really going on. Hyungjun's expression turned serious. He said quietly that it really felt like the world was going to end. Hearing that, Su-hong froze for a moment. He asked Hyungjun if he had heard the rumors too. Hyungjun explained that one of his gym members talked about statues moving and zombies appearing. He asked Sung if he happened to believe it. He added that he hadn't believed it when he first heard it, but then his friend told him to watch closely and suddenly began levitating. Hearing this, Sung fell silent and then acted surprised, saying it was real. Hyungjun admitted that he saw it with his own eyes. It definitely looked like a superpower. Hearing that, Su-hong told Hyungjun that he had not awakened any abilities himself. Hyungjun told him the same thing. Their conversation shifted when Hyungjun mentioned hearing that someone with powers was heading to a broadcasting station to make money from the chaos. Hearing that, Soo-hong couldn't understand why anyone would think about money at a time like this. Hyungjun sat down and asked Surum to sit down too, saying how should he know. He added that the person with powers said he had a meeting with a broadcasting station PD. Hearing that, Surum wondered if ordinary people would soon learn about the existence of awakened individuals. Hyungjun shook his head, saying probably not, because something far more concerning had already happened that day. Hearing that, Song asked him what it was. Hyungjun revealed the news with a grave expression and told Song that there had been a shootout in Yeouido. Hearing that, Soo-hong's eyes widened in shock. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Hyungjun stared at him and asked if he hadn't watched the news that morning. Soo-hong admitted he had been busy and missed it. Hearing that, Hyungjun understood that Soo-hong's reaction was understandable and told him to check the petition board. When Soo-hong looked at his phone, he saw a post demanding the truth about the Yeouido shootout. The post claimed that breaking news about a shootout had appeared briefly but was quickly deleted, along with all related articles and posts. Many people were demanding answers, calling it media control. Reading it, Song felt dizzy and shocked. He said it was crazy to see news getting deleted in real time. He asked if there was any follow-up report. Hyungjun told Song that when he was watching the news earlier, he saw that they tried to cover it up by saying it was caused by a deserter, but it didn't make sense to remove breaking news so quickly. He added that the entire Yeouido area was now sealed off by the military and police. As Hyungjun spoke, saying it was clear something huge was being concealed, Soo-hong suddenly stood up. He made an excuse and left quickly, saying he remembered something urgent. Seeing him running, Hyungjun called him a punk and told him that if he wanted to hear more, he would have to buy him protein next time. Later, after returning home, he sat quietly in his room and took a long time to organize his thoughts. A shootout had happened just one day after the orc incident ended. The media response had been too coordinated, and even the government already knew about the situation. He opened his computer and looked at files related to the incident, including recordings about the discovery of the orc corpse at Mount Jiri. There shouldn't have been many people who knew the exact timing of the first precursor phenomenon. Yet everything had unfolded too neatly. He thought carefully. He had even buried the red orc's corpse beyond the dimension himself. So how could things still develop like this? Why did a shootout occur at such perfect timing? A possibility slowly formed in his mind. It might just be excessive speculation, but what if someone had leaked important information to the government from the very beginning? What if that person had already prepared and started taking action since the first precursor phenomenon? He considered another angle. If that person didn't possess an offensive ability like his, they might have stayed hidden instead of stepping forward. There were many types of awakened abilities. Not all of them were suited for combat. He couldn't be certain who it was, but one thing was clear. Someone else was moving in the shadows. Behind the government, there was someone pulling the strings. He could not be sure who it was, but he knew there had to be someone behind everything. After thinking carefully, he narrowed down the mastermind to the creator of the game Survival Life, and 3 veteran players connected to it. After much thought, he eliminated the creator as the main suspect. He did not know how they had done it, but if the end of the game was now happening in reality, then the ones who built the world and its system were the most likely villains. Besides, if the creator had truly been backed by the government, then they would never have allowed him to kill an orc so easily. He narrowed down the mastermind to the veteran players. He began analyzing the veteran players, and among them, one stood out the most, Survivor 1. Song thought that if his theory was correct, then maybe things would become easier for him, because he wouldn't have to personally share any information with the government at all. Sitting across the table earlier, he had tried to keep a calm face, but now alone he leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. He honestly didn't know what the right choice was. Even though he behaved very differently inside the game compared to real life, he couldn't stop thinking about it. If that was true, then maybe the real Survivor 1 he knew was different from the one everyone suspected. Despite everything, he still missed his veteran friends. Memories of them laughing together filled his mind, making him feel a little lonely. After thinking it over, he decided to trust them for now. Sharing information wouldn't stop the coming catastrophe anyway. To face what was coming in an orderly way, he knew it wasn't his time to step in yet. 2 days later, he returned to focus on preparation. Inside the shelter, he checked the supplies and confirmed that the food storage had finally been organized. With that done, the first shelter setup was nearly complete, even before the generator arrived. He walked around the room, reviewing everything carefully. There was a food storage area, an armory, and all the essential tools arranged neatly. Planning the next stage, he decided that for Phase 2, he would install steel logistics trays in the room. After that, he would drill through the wall using a hammer drill to continue building the shelter. But after looking around, he realized there was far less space than he had expected. The basement waterproofing was already done, since he had been working on it little by little. However, until it fully healed, he couldn't store anything down there. He decided to figure out the rest during Phase 2 construction. Right now, there was something more important to do. He picked up a drone and prepared it for use. As the drone flew into the sky, he watched it in awe. He already knew this subdimension was big, but seeing it in action felt unbelievable. To him, it was basically at an Amazon level of efficiency. In his eyes, drones were completely overpowered. With the controller in his hands, he felt safe exploring the surroundings. There was no need to worry about being ambushed. The drone made real-time mapping easy, allowing him to create maps of the terrain quickly. He even used a VR device to view everything clearly, impressed by how useful the expensive equipment was. After a brief moment of admiration, he set the shelter as the center point and began a full-scale terrain exploration. Through the drone, he discovered that there were endless snowfields to the northwest. Suddenly, the drone's signal started to weaken. He frowned as interference appeared, and the drone struggled to maintain its connection while flying over the forest and mountains. Still, it managed to reach the south and confirmed that there was an ocean there. The sea had no monsters and was full of prey, making it a perfect place for gathering food. He thought about going there later to set up some fish traps. With the terrain scouting finished, he started studying the valley around the shelter to understand the ecosystem. Thankfully, there were no owlbears in the area. Then suddenly, he noticed something. The drone hovered over a familiar place, the spot where he had once met the owlbear. But when he looked closely, he realized something was wrong. The corpse of the orc he killed was gone. He wondered if the owlbear had eaten it. However, the bones he saw earlier did not look like goblin bones. Looking at the ground more carefully, he noticed many different footprints scattered around the area. He decided not to jump to conclusions yet. Some of the footprints clearly belonged to goblins, which made the situation even more suspicious. The distance between the shelter and the valley was about 1.5 kilometers, meaning any danger there could easily approach his base. Realizing this, he understood that the shelter might be more dangerous than he had initially thought. Concluding that goblins were likely nearby, he grew more cautious about the threats surrounding him. He pressed the RTH button to bring the drone back home. He could not afford to lose such an expensive and precious device. Even during the return flight, the drone kept sending back information about the forest. From the data, he learned that part of the area was a swamp. It was also home to wild animals like boars, deer, and rabbits. Looking at the map, he studied the terrain and wildlife carefully. He began to understand what the surrounding environment was like. However, he knew that checking through the drone alone was not enough. If he wanted detailed information, he would have to explore the area himself. He prepared his gear and decided to start with the nearest swamp. He wanted to see whether farming could be possible there. Just as he was getting ready, he heard a strange sound coming from his phone. He looked at it and realized it was the infrared detector. He smirked slightly. It was as if the enemies had appeared right when he was thinking about them. Soon, he stood in the forest and faced the situation calmly. He noted that goblins really had no manners. From the footprints on the ground, it didn't look like a large group, probably 6 to 8 of them out hunting. They had already been on his mind, so their appearance felt like perfect timing. Seeing the trail of footprints leading straight toward him, he quietly thought that they were coming to him on their own feet. As he moved deeper into the forest, his senses felt sharper than before. He wondered if his perception stat had increased, because every small sound around him seemed louder than usual. Even the faint noise of insects in the grass stood out clearly. Soon he hid his presence and quietly spotted the goblins from a distance. They were fighting over food. Seeing them argue around a trapped rabbit, he realized they were distracted. He quietly took position and thought that this was the perfect angle for an ambush. Drawing his bow, he released an arrow. It flew swiftly and struck one goblin in the head, killing it instantly. The other goblins were shocked and roared in anger as they looked around for the attacker. Before they could react properly, more attacks followed. The battle began as he used his advantage to strike them one by one. The goblins panicked and roared in anger, rushing toward his position with weapons in their hands. But he remained calm and moved swiftly. Drawing his axe, he jumped down and attacked them head-on. He slashed through one goblin's body and then struck another with a powerful blow. The enemies tried to surround him, screaming and charging together, but he moved faster than them. With quick steps and precise attacks, he dodged their weapons and cut them down one after another. One goblin attempted to strike him from the side, but he spun and drove his blade straight into its neck. Another rushed forward, only to be kicked away and finished with a swift strike. Within moments, the battlefield fell silent. The goblins collapsed on the ground, defeated. Standing among the fallen bodies, he calmly looked around and counted his kills. 4 enemies had been taken down. He then stepped forward and asked the remaining ones what they would do now. Instead of answering, the goblins fired poison darts at him. However, the darts bounced off his helmet and armor without effect. He mocked them, saying that even villains should wait when someone is talking. Seeing that poison did not work, the goblins rushed in for melee combat. He accepted their choice and praised it as an excellent decision. Surrounded by enemies, he calmly held his sword and prepared to fight them all at once. As the goblins charged toward him from every direction, he stood ready, confident and steady. He quietly praised them, calling it an excellent choice, but he was talking about himself. As those goblins surrounded him and attacked together, Su Hong took out a flash bomb and used it, which released a very powerful flash. The enemies were hit hard and fell to the ground, groaning in pain as the status effect took hold. Seeing them weakened, Su Hong said it looked like the status effect had hit properly. He prepared for the final move. He tightened his grip on his weapon and declared that it was time to finish this. In a flash, he unleashed a fast and precise attack that cut down all the remaining goblins. A system message appeared, showing that he had leveled up to level 4 and gained 16 points. After the battle ended, he stood alone in the forest, surrounded by defeated enemies, and let out a tired breath. He reflected that he had only tried the attack because the enemies were already weakened by confusion. But looking at his green blood-stained knife in his hand, he was surprised that it had actually worked. After the battle, Su Hong felt tired, but his work was still not done. He began digging a pit to bury the bodies, complaining that this was troublesome. But what was really funny was that his survival craving skill didn't activate during the fight, yet it triggered while digging. As he worked at full speed, he was surprised at how efficient it was. Looking at his hands, he realized the skill activation was not completely useless. Unlike before, only his health had dropped slightly, and the recoil was not severe. After finishing the burial, he stood in front of the mound of earth and calmly said that he had finished burying the corpses. He then turned his head toward a pile of bags lying on the ground and said that now it was time to check the loot. He walked over and opened one of the bags. Inside, he found a round red fruit. A system window appeared, identifying it as guaca fruit, which restores health. He held the fruit in his hand and said quietly that this must be what it looked like before being ground into powder. Looking at the other items, especially the vegetable oil, he guessed there might be a place nearby where the fruit grows. Then he reached for the pouch that belonged to the goblin boss. He opened it and paused. Something inside moved slightly. With a confused look, he stared inside and asked what it was. He slowly lifted the small creature with both hands. In his palms was a small blue toad, quietly sitting and blinking at him. He looked at it in surprise and lifted it closer, staring carefully. The creature moved slightly in his glove. He wondered why the goblins would carry a living toad instead of a dead one. He brought it closer to his face. As he sniffed, he paused. There was a musty smell coming from the toad. Just then, something wet touched his hand. A green liquid began leaking onto his glove from the toad. He recognized it instantly, and his eyes widened. He thought that this unpleasant green liquid could only be one thing: the paralysis poison that goblins used. Startled, he quickly held the toad away from him. Even so, he looked at it with growing interest. He then took off his helmet and made up his mind. He said that he absolutely had to raise this creature. He realized that raising the toad meant he could extract paralysis poison whenever he needed. More than anything, he found the creature cute, but that wasn't the main reason. If he kept it, he would have many chances to increase his poison resistance. He imagined the green poison, covering weapons, arrows, blades, even an axe. He got excited because he knew that using paralysis poison would make hunting much easier. He looked at the tiny blue toad in his hand and made a decision. He said its name would be Jado from now on. He gently poked the toad and promised to give it lots of food. Right then, system windows appeared around him. One message said he had given the poison toad a name. Another explained that because the toad was sleeping, he had successfully empathized with it. The last one said the poisoned toad, J. Jodok, was now considered his property. He stared at the messages with an embarrassed expression. He wondered if something like this had ever existed in the game Sura. He questioned whether this was some kind of hidden mechanic added to reality, like the strange characteristics of dimensional gates. He thought for a moment, or maybe something else was happening. He remembered the last notification he got from the game Sura. It thanked all the users who had supported Survival Life, and said the game's service would be completely shut down in 1 week. Su Hong froze, remembering that announcement. He wondered how an update could have been installed last week when he wasn't even logged in. He shook his head and thought that the idea was too ridiculous. No one updates a game right before shutting the server down. He stopped worrying about it and focused on what he needed to do now. He told himself he should be exploring instead of overthinking. He activated the dimensional gate, and a bright blue portal opened in front of him. He stepped through it. He moved back and forth between his room and the other world, carrying supplies and organizing everything he needed. Once he finished reorganizing, he returned through the gate. Back in the forest, he immediately started searching the area. Soon, he found a hidden spring, something even his drone couldn't detect before. He stepped closer, surprised by how peaceful and beautiful the water looked. He said it was crazy that a place like this was so close to the goblin hideout. He knelt beside the spring and scooped some water with a ladle. After checking it, he smiled with relief. He said the water was fine, just normal, clean water, so there was nothing to worry about. He wrote in his notebook, noting that this spring solved his drinking water problem. Because of this, he didn't need to visit the swamp immediately. As he looked around, he confirmed that the place had exactly the resources he expected. There were guava trees filled with red fruits and vegetable oil buds growing nearby. He quickly started picking the guava fruits, grabbing as many as he could, and sending them through the dimensional gate. After that, he collected a good amount of vegetable oil buds. He left one plant untouched, saying he would keep it just in case. When he finished gathering everything, he walked through the forest and marked several trees. He made sure to leave signs along the path so he wouldn't forget how to return to the spring again. He looked up at the sky and smiled, wondering if he should head back now. Satisfied with everything he gathered, he closed his notebook and prepared to return. The next day, the scene shifted to his rooftop building in the city. Inside, Suong gently called out to the small blue creature, Toad Jadok. Wearing protective clothing, he held out a cricket with tweezers and told Jadok to open its mouth. The blue toad stretched out its long tongue and snapped the insect out of the air in one quick motion. Shang smiled happily and said Jadok was eating well. He had decided to raise Jadok on the second floor of the house for now, because he knew that toads usually live in warm environments around 18 to 25 degrees. Jadok rested comfortably inside a small stone area surrounded by plants, blinking up at Surong from below. Su Hong thought about the toad's needs and realized that if he left Jadok in the hideout without proper heating, it would definitely die. After feeding it, Su Hong gently placed a container in front of it, and the blue toad released some poison into it. Besides caring for Jadok, he had many other tasks to handle. He continued working in the lab, pouring green poison into dishes and preparing samples. There were so many things to do. Out of all the tasks, the one that took the most time was making the ointment. He ended up producing way more than he expected and stared at the stack of filled containers. He muttered that his hands were naturally big, so he accidentally made too much. But then another problem came up. He couldn't give the ointment to Mikyung since she was an awakener. He wondered what he should do with all of it. After thinking for a moment, his eyes widened a bit. He suddenly remembered someone. He thought that maybe he could give the ointment to Mikyung. At night, the lights inside the gym building were still on, shining brightly through the windows. Inside, Hyungjun was drinking a protein shake. His throat moved as he gulped it down. He let out a satisfied groan and said that protein drinks bought by his younger brother were always the best. Su Skun stood in front of him. He scratched his head awkwardly and said he was a bit late. Hyungjun told him it was fine, but admitted he expected him to come the next day and had felt a little disappointed. Shung pointed at the bag he brought and said he came with both hands full. Hyungjun chuckled and said he didn't expect a whole container of protein. He then picked up another item from the bag and asked what the small round container was. Su Hong smiled and explained that he bought too much ointment and that it was supposed to be good for wounds. Su Hong got a little nervous as Hyu Hongjun questioned him. Hyu Hongjun asked if he was doing some kind of multi-level marketing. Su Hong waved his hand quickly and said he wasn't that gullible. Hyungjun then thanked him and said he appreciated all the sewer-related information Sung had been sending through messages. Sung smiled and shook his head. He said he was actually the one who should be grateful. If it weren't for Hyungjun, he wouldn't have known about the shooting incident. After a moment, Soo-hong looked around and asked why the gym felt so quiet. Hyungjun explained that everyone had gone out to make plans. Soo-hong tilted his head and asked what kind of plans he meant. As they walked outside, Hyungjun said it was about the guy who went to the broadcasting station. He explained that apparently, that guy had shared information with the gym members before leaving. Hyungjun added that, because of that, the members requested to set up a base there, so they decided to make the gym their base for now. Soo-hong's eyes widened in shock. He asked how many people were involved. Hyungjun answered casually that there were about 20. Hearing that, Soo-hong panicked. He asked if Hyungjun had even read the information properly. He said anything more than 6 people was dangerous. But Hyungjun replied that they had no choice. They still had to try. He then grew serious and said all those people were their members, and they couldn't just leave them behind. Soo-hong looked at him, and thought to himself that, as expected, Hyungjun was a loyal person, despite his tough appearance. Hyungjun then asked what Seung planned to do next. Seung said he needed more time to think about it. Hyungjun nodded and said that since Seung was also a non-awakened person, if he had nowhere else to go, he could stay. But before he could finish his sentence, a loud scream echoed from outside. Both of them reacted instantly. Hyungjun was stunned and asked if that was a scream. Seung sprinted toward the window at full speed, telling Hyungjun that he was going to open it. Seung rushed to the window and pushed it open. He leaned out, looking down with wide eyes, as something caught his attention. His expression turned stiff. Shock spread across his face. Far below the building, a girl lay on the ground. Seung recognized her instantly and shouted her name, Mi-kyung. He and Hyungjun hurried outside. Mi-kyung slowly opened her eyes, letting out a weak sound. Seung knelt beside her and asked if she was conscious. Her gaze was blurry as she whispered his name, confused about why she was on the ground. He told her he wanted to know the same thing, and asked if she remembered anything. Mi-kyung held her head and said she didn't remember clearly, but someone had suddenly attacked her. Hyungjun clenched his fists tightly. Anger filled his face as he cursed the person who did it. Hyungjun told Song to stay with the injured Mi-kyung. Song was confused and asked what he meant, but Hyungjun was already running off. He said he would check the entire area himself. Soo-hong helped Mi-kyung sit up and asked if she remembered what the attacker looked like. Mi-kyung shook her head. She said everything suddenly went dark. Soo-hong repeated her words in surprise. Mi-kyung explained that it was strange. It wasn't like someone covered her eyes. It just suddenly turned black. Hearing that, Soo-hong clenched his teeth. He thought to himself that the enemy might have already started moving. He turned to Mi-kyung and spoke seriously. He told her that if something like this happened again, she needed to use her blink skill right away. Mi-kyung looked shocked and tried to protest, but Soo-hong cut her off. He told her she had to use it. He also said he would send her some self-defense equipment, and she must keep it with her. Images of In-hak's group flashed through his mind. Those people who were clearly after her. He warned Mi-kyung that from now on she really needed to be careful. Then the next day, Soo-hong explained that there had always been a famous saying, if 5 people gather, one of them is definitely trash. He said this idea existed everywhere, and that trolls could be found all around the world. In the game Sura, where the developers rarely interfered except for small patches, this problem was even worse. Players filed reports but nothing was ever done about it. Trolls would join teams while pretending to be normal players. They acted friendly at first, saying things like, I know this area well, just follow me. The team followed, trusting them, but the troll would lead them into a dangerous place full of monsters. Once the party was surrounded, the troll would stand back and watch as the monsters attacked. Sometimes trolls targeted beginners. They approached them kindly, offering help like, do you want me to carry you? The newbies happily trusted them. Not knowing the troll had a knife hidden behind his back, the troll's real goal became clear. After acting kind, he suddenly stabbed the newbie in the back. The troll laughed and mocked him, calling him stupid for falling for the trick. Trolls didn't stop at that. They also caused trouble between different parties, starting fights for no reason. Soon, entire groups were battling each other because of the chaos they created. The masked troll enjoyed every moment of it, laughing to himself. Because of these actions, the game, already not very popular, became even worse. The number of players kept dropping. From over 500 players online, the number eventually fell to only 4. Trolls played a huge role in the game's downfall within just 1 year. And the reason the user count dropped to only 4 was simple. The remaining players worked together and punished every troll they could find. In the end, the surviving players stood over a defeated troll, showing how they handled anyone who caused trouble. Why Song was suddenly giving such a long explanation. The reason became clear. It was the perfect time for trolls to cause trouble everywhere. Song sat in front of his computer and began to summarize the information he had gathered. He explained that after the Uido shootout, all the Awakeners' online communities were merged into one place. Many people gathered there. People preparing for the end of the world. They weren't just sharing information. Some were also planning scams, dangerous schemes, or even crimes. On the real-time board, people posted strange things. Requests for team members, dangerous missions, and even someone asking who wanted to rob a bank. Then Su Hong noticed something surprising. Someone was selling his videos online. Suddenly, he saw something on the screen that shocked him. On the real-time board, a post offered a special deal. First 10 people. Kimbap Joy play video for 10 million won. The screen showed a user named Wajusem, with more than 420 hours of playtime. Sim immediately recognized him as a troll. A video began playing. It showed a cheerful guy claiming he was selling a video of Kimbap Joa carrying him during his newbie days. He asked people to contact him directly if they wanted to buy it. Watching this, Shang frowned. He asked himself, when did he ever carry anyone? He then wondered if the troll had cut and edited random clips to fool people. The thought annoyed him, but at the same time, he was oddly impressed by how shameless the troll was. He shook his head, amazed by how someone could think like that. Then he stretched his arms and stood up. He told himself that if he wanted to deal with people like that, he needed to get stronger. A moment later, glowing energy surrounded his hand as he opened the portal. He smiled and said that he should increase his training time. For 13 days, he spent every free moment learning. He studied weapon usage and watched many videos online. He focused on techniques that could be used in real fights, especially from survival channels on YouTube. But everything he had seen so far was mainly about attacking monsters and clearing places like the hideout. There were also many weapons and strategies that did not consider the wire disease at all. Thinking about this, he decided to change his approach. He smiled slightly and said that from today, he would choose a main weapon that could still be used even if the wire disease appeared. He sat on his bag in the forest and looked at the scattered wooden training dummies. He said he needed a weapon that worked well for fighting both people and monsters. Then he opened a wooden box to see his choices. Inside the box were simple weapons: an Indian war club, a wooden slingshot, a handful of oki clay beads, and a handmade stone axe. As he checked each item, he realized that if he considered all conditions, there were almost no weapons he could actually use, so he decided to try the slingshot first. He picked it up and loaded a small bead. He said the slingshot was useful in many ways, but something still bothered him. He pulled the band back and fired. A blue streak shot forward with great speed and hit a wooden post. The bead struck the target, but the result was weak. He quietly noted that the Ukir clay beads had low power and were not very effective. He looked at the weapons again and asked himself if this was the only one left. He picked up the Indian war club and held it in his hand. He thought that if the wire disease was the main problem, then he didn't need to worry too much. The easiest way to deal with zombies was simple: crush the spores inside their skulls with a blunt weapon. A memory of a zombie's head breaking under a heavy strike flashed in his mind. He also remembered that the first item he wanted to buy at the level 10 shop was a blunt-type weapon, the ebony wood club. So he needed to train his skill with blunt weapons. He swung the Indian club down with force. As he hit the training dummy, he wondered if this weapon was also good against people. But the more he tested it, the more unsure he felt. He kept swinging the club, striking the wooden targets again and again. Even with fast movements and strong hits, he still felt the weapon was unclear and not fully reliable. He finished one heavy strike, sending the dummy flying, but his expression showed he was still questioning it. He imagined what would happen if he met a psychic awakener. Thinking about them made sweat run down his face. He thought that if he faced a psychic type, he might not even be able to move. But he told himself he couldn't just stand still. He grabbed the Indian war club again. He reminded himself that in survival life, killing a human gave 50 points. He let out a slow breath. He imagined the space around him changing into a digital grid. A hostile figure appeared in front of him, a bald man holding a sword. He remembered the murderer system, a rule that forced users marked as murderers to fight deadly battles against other nearby players. The bald man raised his sword high and rushed at him. He swung his war club with full strength to block the attack. He knew that the system prevented players from abusing PK. player killing, but even so, many dangerous people still existed. Su Hong swung his weapon with full strength. His strike cut through the glowing space, and the bald enemy was hit hard. Even though the system gave demerits, there were still people who killed players just to earn points. His eyes widened as a bright blue light flashed across them. He rushed forward again, breaking through the air with another heavy strike. His body moved fast, and red fragments scattered around him. When the fight ended, he stood in the real world, breathing heavily. Broken pieces of the training dummy lay on the ground in front of him. He wiped his sweat and told himself that it was still better to avoid dangerous people for now. He thought it would be smarter to finish collecting items and skills first. As he wiped his face with a towel, he continued thinking. He said he should also take apart the store completely and put a detector on the second floor. Before he could finish speaking, a loud scream echoed from far away. A loud scream echoed through the forest. He stopped walking and looked around. He wondered why he heard a wolf's sound at this time. His phone started buzzing in his hand. With a surprised expression, he asked if a wolf had gotten hurt near his hideout. He then walked through the trees wearing a helmet. He lifted the visor and said in disbelief that he couldn't believe what he was seeing. A large gray wolf lay on the ground, completely still. He said the wolf was big enough for him to ride. He stepped closer and saw that the wolf was no longer breathing. He thought about what mattered most. The wolf had died very close to his hideout. He wondered if it was just a stray wolf, or if it had come down the mountain because something attacked it. He said he needed to check the wolf's wounds to find out more. He reached out and touched the wolf's fur gently. He knelt beside the wolf in the quiet forest, looking closely. As he leaned forward, he suddenly heard something move behind him. He quickly turned his head. A small white wolf jumped out and bit him from behind. He gasped in shock. He froze for a moment, then looked back. He realized something. The collapsed gray wolf was the little one's mother. The small wolf barked at him again, standing protectively in front of its mother's body. He looked at the cub and thought about what to do. He saw the small wolf staying close to its mother and licking her. He knew he couldn't separate the cub by force, but he also knew he had to bury the mother quickly. He held the shovel in his hand. He thought that if the dead wolf had been a monster, it would turn into a bone creeper, and if it didn't, its body would attract other monsters. He started digging the ground. He kept digging until the hole was large enough. He stood beside the finished hole and let out a tired breath. He looked at the wolf's body and said he had finished digging. He looked at the cub lying beside its mother. He thought the cub was touching to see, because it reminded him of his younger self. He thought about the little cub and remembered Mengqi, the dog he raised when he was young. He looked at the cub again and finally said he would just go with it. He picked the cub up by the back of its neck. The cub barked angrily and reached toward its mother. He held the cub in his arms and told it to listen to what he had to say first. He told the cub that its mom would be sleeping here. He smiled at the cub and said he would even make a small hole in the hideout door so the cub could visit whenever it missed its mom. Then he reached into his vest pocket. He held out a piece of meat in his hand and gently told the small white cub that he would make sure it never starved until it was fully grown. The little cub looked at the food with wide eyes as he continued speaking. He told it that in return, it would help him with its excellent sense of smell. Then he knelt down and fed the cub with his own hand. The small creature quickly began to eat, accepting his offer without hesitation. After the cub ate, Song took out another piece of meat and held it out. He gently asked the cub if it would come with him. The small cub wagged its tail and barked, showing that it was willing to go with him. Su Hong immediately realized that the cub was saying yes. He patted the cub gently and named it Dingo, saying he was counting on him from now on. The cub barked again happily. Just then, a system notification appeared, telling Song that he had named the gray wolf and had succeeded in communicating with the gray wolf. Another message appeared, telling Song that the gray wolf, Dingo, was now considered his property. Su Hong carries the cub back to Earth. On the rooftop, he starts to teach it. He calls the pup Dingo, and while teaching it, Su Hong finds out that Dingo is a genius. He asks Dingo to do it just like he taught him. Dingo barks in agreement. He says, paw, and Dingo gives its paw. He says, turn, and the pup turns. He says, sit, and the pup sits. He says, lie down, and the pup lies down. He says, quiet, and the pup stops barking. The pup learns fast. At the end, he tells it to wait, and the pup waits. Shang smiles and says that this will be the last test. Reaching into his pocket, he takes out a bone and holds it in his hand. With a confident expression, he throws the bone high into the air and gives the command to jump. Dingo barks loudly and immediately reacts. It dashes forward and leaps up, its small body moving fast as it chases the spinning bone. In midair, it catches the bone perfectly in its mouth. Landing back on the ground, Dingo holds the bone tightly between its teeth, looking proud. Watching this, Su Hong laughs lightly and thinks that it might be because the pup is not from this world. He feels impressed by how capable it is. As Dingo eats the bone, Su Hong is impressed because Dingo is even good at tracking scents. He gently pats its head and thinks that this little one is truly a blessing, like a bundle of luck. He hugs the little pup tightly and kisses its head with affection. With a soft smile, he calls it his baby, clearly very fond of it. He says that at this rate, Dingo will start hunting on his own. Just then, his phone suddenly vibrates inside his pocket. Taking out his phone, he looks at the screen and notices a message. It is from his older brother, which surprises him. He finds it unusual that his brother contacted him first. He opens the message and reads it carefully. It tells him to search the word levitation on the internet. Curious, he follows the instruction. After searching, he sees the news and is immediately shocked. An article claims that a man says he is the first superhuman, and that zombies and monsters will soon appear, bringing disaster. He continues reading and sees more details. The report mentions a live broadcast where a man demonstrates levitation and warns about the future. Seeing all this, he can only stare at the screen in disbelief. Then he checks the rankings. The article has already reached number 1 on the news list. He sits on the sofa, scrolling through the comments on his tablet. Many people online are reacting to the news. Some question if it is real. Others mock it, saying the broadcast is just for hype. A few even say life is already bad and don't care if everything collapses. Some just complain about their daily lives, like wanting to go home from work. He notices that most of these comments come from ordinary people who don't know anything about eras. Then he looks at more comments. Some people insult the man, calling him an idiot. Others make fun of him, saying his brain must be empty. Some even say that even if he has powers, zombies will kill him anyway. At the same time, some awakened people are also starting to panic. Seeing all this, Su Hong finds it a bit funny. But he also notices something strange. People complain when information isn't shared, yet they also hate it when it spreads. He leans back and thinks seriously about the situation. He wonders how the government will respond to all this. He realizes that the situation is already getting out of control. Some groups are using fear and talk of superpowers as an excuse to hold rallies and stir people up. He suddenly stops his thoughts. He realizes that digging too deep into this situation right now is not a good idea. As he calms down, he remembers something important. Once the second omen appears, the Hobgoblin event will begin. And when that happens, the government will finally be forced to show its reaction and take action. Thinking about this, he understands one thing clearly. Time is running out. He stands up from the sofa with a firm expression. He decides that from now on, he has to use every moment wisely. Looking at his small cub, he speaks seriously. He apologizes to Dingo and says that starting today, they need to begin exploring immediately. In his mind, the answer is simple. The only way to survive is to prepare properly. He looks at Dingo again and asks if he is ready. The little Dingo barks loudly in response, full of energy. He thinks about all the choices he has. In the end, he decides to explore another dimension with Dingo for a reason. Standing in the forest, he holds a small bag and asks Dingo if he can find it. Dingo immediately reacts, growling lightly before barking with confidence. The small Dingo begins sniffing the ground and searching carefully. Su Hong watches quietly. His first goal is clear. He needs to prepare for the upcoming Hobgoblin event. For that, Dingo has to learn and remember the scent of goblins properly. After some time, Dingo successfully tracks the scent and finds the spot. Seeing this, Su Hong is impressed. Tracking a location just from a faint smell is better than he expected. Then he moves on to the next step. He needed to check if Dingo could stay calm during real combat. As the hunt began, Su Hong crouched down beside Dingo and called his name softly. Dingo responded, but this time his voice was lower, showing tension and focus. He gave a clear command and told Dingo to follow his instructions. In the next moment, he moved his hand sharply, signaling to attack. With a streak of energy, Dingo shot forward across the ground. Dingo dashed forward at high speed, chasing the moving target without hesitation. Right now, they were testing something important. A rabbit appeared ahead, unaware of the danger. In an instant, Dingo closed the distance. With precise timing, He pounced and took down the rabbit cleanly. Seeing this, Su Hong nodded in satisfaction. He praised Dingo for doing a good job. This test confirmed something important. Hunting in the other world was possible. Su Hong smiled slightly as he thought about it. Last time the prey had escaped, so he could not check it properly. But this time he finally got his answer. He lifted the rabbit and examined it carefully. Looking at its size, he began to think. Then he checked its claws as well. From what he saw, he came to a clear conclusion. Animals in this world were definitely stronger than normal ones. Dingo barked proudly from below, as if asking for praise. After that, Su Hong and Dingo continued moving forward, exploring the forest together. As they walked, a new thought suddenly appeared in his mind. He wondered what Dingo's intelligence would look like if it were turned into stats. Thinking about it, he decided there was no harm in testing it, so he planned to head toward the valley next. At that moment, a blue screen suddenly appeared in front of him. It showed that his health had increased by 1. Seeing this, he was caught off guard. He stared at the screen in surprise, wondering how it had already increased so quickly. He thought about the situation carefully. Based on his own experience, he remembered that his health stat had once reached 170. Looking at Dingo now, he realized something surprising. Dingo was growing incredibly fast. But suddenly, Dingo started panting heavily. Seeing this, Song quickly called out to him. He told Dingo not to move around alone in the forest. Then he took out some water and a bowl, letting Dingo drink. As Dingo drank, Su Hong started thinking again. He wondered if that burning feeling earlier had something to do with what Dingo ate. He looked around and soon noticed a strange plant. It had long green peppers hanging from it. Curious, he picked one up and examined it closely. He wondered if this was the reason behind everything. Then a system window appeared in front of him. It identified the item as a bull pepper. Seeing this, he was shocked. He could not believe he had found something like this here. He praised Dingo with a smile, telling him he did a great job. He promised to give him plenty of treats later. Then he started digging carefully with a shovel, collecting what he had found. With that unexpected harvest, they prepared to move again. This time, they set out for their final hunt. They soon reached a river in the forest. Su Hong looked around carefully and asked Dingo if he sensed anything strange nearby. He remembered that red trout were not considered monsters. Because of that, they did not give any points or items. Still, for Dingo, who was curious and growing fast, this was a good chance to gain experience. In the next moment, a fish suddenly jumped out of the water. Dingo reacted instantly, his eyes wide with excitement. Without hesitation, Su Hong threw his spear. The spear pierced straight through the fish mid-air. Seeing this, it became clear. Even if there were no rewards, the effort was still worth it. Song said that they should finish preparing for Phase 2 construction and then head home. Beside him, Dingo barked happily in response. The next day arrived. Some workers called out to him, addressing him as the boss. The workers carefully carried out the remaining materials as the job came to an end. They informed Song that the demolition work was now complete. One of the workers told him that if any repair issues appeared, he should contact them within 3 days. Su Hong thanked them for working so early in the morning. He then turned and looked at the place quietly. Seeing the building completely torn down made him feel a little heavy inside. He walked into the room with a heavy heart. Looking around, he stood quietly, thinking to himself that even so, it had been a necessary choice. He believed that if someone was lucky enough not to turn into a zombie, then looting shops would naturally follow. Watching the situation around him, he calmly accepted it. He thought that if he survived, he would also scavenge. There was no right to complain in a world like this. After a moment, he decided that he should at least clean up the place. But suddenly, a voice came from behind, saying that it seemed that everyone had the same idea as him. It was Hyung Jin. He said that he had also left only the bare minimum equipment the day before. Su Hong turned his head in surprise, wondering why Hyung Jin was there. Hyung Jin suddenly reached out and flicked his forehead. Caught off guard, Su Hong flinched in pain. Hyung Jin told him that he had left him behind yesterday, so he came to check whether he was dead or alive. Nearby, Dingo barked loudly. Hyung Jin looked at Dingo in surprise and asked why he suddenly had a husky. Shung calmly explained that they had crossed the Rainbow Bridge a long time ago. He then told him that Dingo was a new pet he had brought home. Hearing that, Hyung Jin smiled and said the dog was really adorable. Hyung Jin then asked why Hyung Jin had come all the way here. Hyung Jin replied that he had already said it. He was worried about whether he was alive. Su Hong looked at him with a small smile and asked if that was really the only reason. Hyung-jin let out a short laugh and admitted that it was not just that. He then said that he had been worried too. His expression turned serious as he spoke again. He mentioned the people who had attacked Mikyung. He revealed that he had found out who they were. Su Hong looked at the table and tried to confirm what he had just heard. He asked Hyung if he was saying that the group led by Kim Chol-jun was targeting Mikyung. Hyung confirmed it, and added that the tow truck guy he hated was part of that group too. Then he pointed toward the mountains and explained that there was a redevelopment site there, and their base was located in that area. Sagong listened carefully and then asked how he managed to find all this information. Hyung replied that everything had just clicked together. Su Hong looked confused and questioned what he meant by clicked. Hyung then brought up Han Jin-sung, the levitation guy from a reality show. He explained that he had asked him about it, just in case, and learned that he had already met Kim Chol-jun and his group before. All three of them had aggressive, warlike personalities, so they did not get along. Because of that, Han Jin-sung had refused their offer. Hyung continued, saying that after the Migyong incident, things had become even more serious. He added that it would not be strange if the female members decided to leave the group. As he spoke, he slammed the table in frustration. He then explained that when he asked them why they were acting that way, they all gave the same answer. They said they had received an offer from an Awakeners group. He looked at Su Hong and asked if he understood the situation now. Su Hong said yes and replied that, unlike Miss Migyung, the others had likely been tempted and persuaded. Hyung then mentioned that their group had shrunk to only 4 members, saying that he showed his phone, where one member after another had left the group. Su Hong was shocked and questioned how that was possible. Just a few days ago, there had been around 20 people. Hyung admitted that it actually made sense, because in their group only 2 people were awakened. Hearing that, Su Hong said it was ironic. Even when Hyung tried to help, things still ended up like this. Hyung said that this was just how the world worked, and that people only looked out for themselves. Looking at his daughter's phone, said that he was more concerned about his daughter Jeon, and wondered if he should call his ex-wife. Hearing that, Sung realized that Hyung's situation was different from his. Because of this, Sung began to think deeply. He questioned himself, wondering if he was really doing the right thing. He then told Hyung that there was just one thing he wanted to know. He stated that when the end came, if someone became a threat, but before he could complete his words, Hyung immediately responded that he would kill them. Hong said that he did not believe in hurting others, but in a lawless disaster. True evil must be eliminated. Then he looked at Song and asked why he was even asking such a question, saying it did not suit him. Sung gave a small awkward laugh and said he did not know why that thought had come to him. While he was saying that, suddenly his phone made a loud alarm sound. Hyung flinched in surprise and said it scared him. Dingo barked as the sound echoed. Hyung realized that the sound was a child safety alarm. Looking at the phone showing the location of the alarm, Song became serious. His expression changed as he asked Hyung to look after Dingo for a moment. At the same time, Mikyung was shown holding that alarm device, looking nervous. Then a voice called out from ahead. It was Oh In-hak, who stood there with his group, blocking the way. He told her that this was no time for drama, and ordered her to come down. Mikyung stood on the edge, her voice trembling as she said no and asked why they kept following her. She looked down and asked him why he was doing this. Below, Oh In-hak tried to persuade her again, asking her to reconsider. Before he could continue, one of his companions placed a hand on his shoulder and told him to stop, saying he would now do things his own way. That man was Kim Chol, their group's leader. He stepped forward holding a bat and warned her that if she wanted things to be gentle, she should come down on her own. Beside him was Ma Jong-in, his support. They told Mikyung that this place was a redevelopment area where no one would come. With a smirk, the leader told her not to waste her strength and reminded her that they had powers too. Then he raised his bat and said he would count to 3. From a nearby corner, Su Hong, wearing a helmet, quietly watched them. He held a slingshot in his hand, and stayed hidden. As the leader began counting, Su Hong pulled back the slingshot string, preparing to strike. Then, with full power, Su Hong released the slingshot. In an instant, a powerful shot burst forward like a beam and shot straight ahead. At the same time, the leader raised his bat and shouted, 3. But before he could react, the attack struck him directly in the shoulder. A sharp impact echoed as the force hit him hard. He let out a painful groan, his body shaking as he dropped to one knee. The others were shocked. They quickly looked around, confused and tense, asking who was there. From the shadows, Song suddenly moved. Before they could understand what was happening, he closed the distance in a flash. The blond man froze for a moment, his eyes widening in shock. Song stood right in front of him and coldly replied that there was no way he would tell him who he was. With a sudden swing, he struck hard, and a powerful blow slammed into the blond man's face. The blond man let out a painful groan as his body jerked from the impact. In the next moment, Song rushed forward again, moving fast without stopping. He swung his body and ran toward the third man. Seeing him coming, the third man raised his hand in panic. Dark purple energy began to gather around it as he screamed in fear. Seeing that dark purple energy, Su Hong wondered if this strange power was his ability. The man swung his hand towards Su Hong, releasing that dark purple energy that blackened the view, but Su Hong slipped through the mist and attacked again. Before the skinny man could react, Shang struck him with his weapon, and with a powerful swing, he sent him flying into the wall behind. But fighting like that made Shang exhausted, and he bent forward, breathing heavily. He then turned to Mikyung and asked if she was okay, but Mikyung suddenly shouted, telling Shang to watch out. In that instant, the thug leader rushed in from behind. A red energy flashed through the air as he swung his weapon at Song. The strike came fast and sharp. Song reacted quickly and stepped back to dodge. Even though it only brushed past him, his helmet glass broke just from the force of the air. Shang was shocked when he saw that. He staggered back, realizing how dangerous the attack was. Even a glancing hit had caused this much damage. The thug leader looked at him calmly and called out his name, asking if he was that Kang Song. Su Hong immediately recognized that the thug leader's power was an offensive trait that was overpowered at the start of the game. Without hesitation, the thug leader declared that he would cripple Su Hong today. The leader smirked and looked at his men. He told them to get ready as well. Behind him, the other two stood up. The thug leader gave another order, telling his men that even if their targets were not awakened, they should not hesitate. The blond man raised his hand and activated his power, replying that he understood. Electricity began to gather around him, and sparks of lightning crackled as power surged through his body. He stepped forward with a cruel smile, and said it was about time that annoying Song was put in his place. Watching this, Song became a little annoyed, realizing that they were not even trying to hide their powers anymore. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. A thought crossed his mind. He wondered if he had to use the dimensional gate. But before he could decide, the blond man charged forward. Lightning wrapped around his fist as he shouted and attacked. In the next instant, a small dingo suddenly jumped into the path. It moved quickly across the ground, and in an instant, it bit down hard on the blond man's arm. A painful scream escaped his mouth as he was caught off guard. The attack was so sudden that everyone froze for a moment. The leader was shocked, staring at the scene in disbelief. Then a voice called out, saying that he could not believe something like this was happening in broad daylight. It was Hyung, who had arrived there with the little dingo. He raised his phone, showing that he was ready to call for help. He warned the thugs to back off if they did not want the situation to escalate. He even showed the emergency number on his screen, making his point clear as he asked them how that deal sounded. The group fell silent for a moment. The thug leader then lowered his head and agreed to stop. He said they would leave it at that for today. With that, they turned around and began to walk away. Watching them leave, Hyung commented that those guys who looked like they would burst with one punch sure were cocky. He then looked at Sung and asked if he was okay. At the same time, Mikyung also came down and called out his name, but Sung just stood there quietly, still wearing his helmet. Mikyung rushed toward him in panic. She grabbed his helmet with both hands and anxiously asked if he was hurt anywhere. Her voice trembled as she called his name, clearly worried. She noticed the crack on his helmet and became even more concerned. She asked if he was really fine, and Hyung even offered to carry him. For a moment, Su Hong froze in confusion. Looking at the two of them, a strange feeling crossed his mind. They somehow reminded him of someone else, like his teammates. Seeing him not saying anything, Mikhaim quickly said they should go to the hospital, but Sung stepped back and refused. He said he was fine and could not afford to rest. After that, he turned to Hyung and asked about his group. He mentioned that their group was down to 4 people and asked if it would be okay for them to take Mikyung in. Hyung agreed and said it was fine as long as Mikyung was okay with it. With a slight smile, he added that the two of them were close anyway, so it worked out for him. Finally, he looked at Mikyung and asked if she was okay with the decision. Mikyung hesitated and said she would really appreciate it. Shung nodded slightly and said he had things to do. He turned around and started walking away. The small dingo followed him closely, barking as it walked beside him. Hyung and Mikyung stood there, watching his back as he walked away. Hyung looked confused and asked what was wrong with him all of a sudden. Mikyung simply shrugged and said she had no idea. Later, after returning home, Soo-hong tried to clear his mind. He decided to start the second phase of his plan earlier than expected. He picked up a drill and began working immediately. He knew he had no choice but to leave from there. Watching the two of them together, he suddenly felt the urge to share his power with them, but he quickly stopped himself. He knew he could not make that decision yet. If he wanted to fully use his dimensional gate, he had to become stronger first. He needed to level up, gain skills, and collect better gear faster than anyone else. Only then could he crush his enemies with pure strength. His recent fight with those mountain thugs made that very clear. Thinking ahead, he believed that if his plan worked, he would be at least 3 levels ahead of others. At that point, the monsters nearby would become too strong, and because of that, it would be harder for him to team up with those two. So, without wasting time, he worked non-stop. As he kept going, time quietly passed by, and at last, he finished installing the wood stove in his hideout. The fire burned warmly inside it. He felt relieved and thought that now he could finally sleep there at night. He noticed that Dingo was enjoying the warmth, which made him feel even better. Next, he reminded himself that he still had to set up everything as the deliveries arrived. He thought about the generator, the stairs, the security camera, and the solar panels. Once all of that was installed, the hideout would basically be complete. Looking satisfied, he decided he might as well stay up all night and finish everything today.